man speaking in the city square, trying to tell somebody that he cares. Can you blame the voice of youth for asking what is true? Yeah, the ones that you're calling wild are gonna be the leaders in a little while. When will the lonely voice of youth cry, what is true? This our world's waking to a newborn babe, and I solemnly swear it'll be their way. You better help that voice of youth find what is true. And the lonely voice of youth cries, what is true?
All right. Welcome in. It's another Friday live stream, and it should be interesting. We have our Sampel, because of course we do. And we have our Muppet Cup. Have you considered? You considered that you should buy one of these? Because you definitely should. Everybody should have a Muppet Cup. And still no Table Rock tea, because I got to order some. I'll probably just drive up there and get some, though. So we get some mint tea instead. It's quite good. It's still steeping. Mint tea is really good because you can steep it pretty much forever, and it just gets better over time. So there we go. So yeah, it's been a heck of a week, and I think more and more people are. I mean, they're not, let's say, coming to the realization, but they're certainly feeling the effects of chaos increasing rather than decreasing. Accelerationists are so funny. So yeah, I think we're seeing a lot of that. A lot of people are like, oh, things aren't getting better. They're changing, and they're just as chaotic as ever, if not more chaotic. Anselman's got soda water. That's good. Cheers indeed, sir. Cheers indeed, good sir. Kettle going on soon for tea. Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, I have to do my tea in advance, but that's okay. I don't mind. I do it for you, my audience. Yeah, I think I'm seeing a lot of signs of things sort of getting strange and people using shortcuts to try to figure out the world again. And I'm like, it's not going to work. You guys just have bad models. That's why you were wrong last time, too. People don't learn real quick. So, yeah, you saw this. And people are like, oh, well, the JFK files are coming out. And it's like, they're a mess. They're a complete mess. They don't answer any questions. You thought the government had answers and they were hiding them? No, they had chaos and they were hiding that. There's too many potential answers. Also, yeah, what the CIA has been up to. Also, like, everybody in the 90s on the internet knew this, but whatever. You guys can be astonished by the quote new information that was not even remotely new information. If you'd like, have fun with that. Let me know how it works out for you. So yeah, it's just been crazy news, crazy stuff going on. Everybody, they don't. Everyone's expecting these resolutions, and they're not. They're not coming. They're not coming. It's only going to get worse. But a lot of it's just how you see the world, and people are just really not seeing the world very well at all. But they're doubling down on everything. And man, I have got a treat. I have got a treat coming on the channel. There will be no live stream next week because I am going to Vegas, baby. Vegas, baby. So yeah, I'm leaving on Sunday, flying out. I won't be at the Saturday book club either. But I will put out hopefully 2 videos next week. Although I'm a video recording behind. I hope to rectify that tomorrow. Otherwise, it ain't getting rectified. Eric Weinstein did a talk at ARC, which for some unbelievably, irrational reason, ARC decided to publish. It's a horrible talk. It just genuinely, independently awful talk. Awful, horrific, really bad. And I break it down. I do a commentary on it. And I tried to do 2 commentaries this week. Both had technical problems. And so one of them didn't get finished yet. I might do it tomorrow. We'll see. We'll see how I feel. See how things go. But no, the Eric Weinstein one's going to be a real treat because I think you'll start to see things in there that maybe you hadn't noticed before. And Eric is being as Eric as he ever was. People will disagree, but I sort of go into the video as to why. No, he's actually been like this for at least 5 years, but it'll be a treat. It'll be a treat. All right, we're gonna read from the Bed of Procrustes, Taleb's Book of Aphorisms. This is, of course, the first edition because I was on Taleb very early. Ooh, there's a section called Counter Narratives. I love it. I'll just read the first one. The best revenge on a liar is to convince him that you believe what he said. Yeah, well, trolls like that, but maybe. Maybe. Vegas, nice. Yeah, we're actually only going to Vegas for like 3 days, and then we're going to see some petroglyphs in Arizona. So I'm actually more looking forward to that. Although we're going to see Penn and Teller, and I love Penn and Teller, so I'm super excited about that. Hanselman started off okay, then went downhill. It started off as a psyop and then became obvious. But sure, that's another way to frame it, I guess. Fly me to the moon and let me play among the stars. Yeah. Well, I don't think it will be that. It will be that good. So, yeah, I mean, trolls and trolling. I love it when people troll themselves. I think that's fantastic. Trolling is another pattern that you can observe in the world, and a lot of people don't understand it. And even when they observe it, they don't do the right thing about it, which is part of the problem of observation versus understanding. Observation precedes understanding, right? And I think a lot of people get confused about that, and I'll definitely try to cover that later here. It was a weird day today. And just the way things worked out, I was not prepared for the live stream at all. Sort of slipped by, and all my technical, but I probably burned 6 hours of work on the 2 commentaries that didn't work out on the first recording. So yeah. Oh, my lighting is good. Well, that's good. Yeah, thanks, Ixon. I've been screwing with the lighting for ages lately. Yeah, it's easier with the hat. But also I've got blackout on the windows and stuff like that. It's crazy in here, actually. I gotta clean the office up and maybe fix that one situation that's annoying me. But I just kept the blackout on the windows for days because I kept saying I'm gonna re-record this, these commentaries, and it didn't happen. I also have a new commentary coming. I got a couple good other commentary things coming up that are more about pieces, not about whole videos. But yeah, but at the last minute on this thing, like I did the notes a few hours ago for this, so the topic was when we had it, sitting in the bin for. If you ever need a topic, we've got a bunch of live stream topics. And then Brian Wander came by on the Discord and didn't really know what was going on, right? He just kind of jumped in the voice channel, and we were in the middle of going over the notes, what few notes I had, and Sally and Adam were helping me out. And Brian just started typing in some questions. And I was like, oh, that's really good, actually. Thanks. That's helpful. So that managed to fill out like a full page of old style notes, in fact. I was trying this new format, but it didn't work out for this topic. So I'm glad I'm glad Brian jumped in and helped out. So that's what happens when you have cooperation of your community, right? And your team. And we'll be getting the community, the Wisdom Community book out really soon. I'm not done with everything but the workbook, and the workbook actually is mostly done. That would just need some organization and readjustment based on the text. But I think I'm halfway done with the last chapter, so I think we're good to go. I know there's a couple minor edits, I think, and then who knows what the editor's going to find when he actually reads it and finds out it doesn't make any sense or whatever. I don't know, but that's the Wisdom Community book and workbook are coming soon. I believe most of the artwork is done too, so we're ready to go. But yeah, I mean, we have a team. It's all volunteer, unfortunately, because I don't have millions of dollars anymore because it all gets stolen from me. But it's nice when people come together and they help out and they help to make the live stream better, because honestly, all of this stuff is actually a lot of work. So I'm glad I'm able to do it. I hope that continues, because things can always get worse. They've been worse before. And it's good to make the observation that this isn't a one-man show. It never was. I didn't even pick the name for the stupid channel. Like, like it's a, and it's also not a major production because we don't have money to throw at this. So far, it's just done nothing but cost me money. It is what it is. And observation is what you see and experience, right? But it's not something that you rationalize. Like, I can't tell you why Brian jumped in when he did and contributed how he did. I don't know. Like, I can't explain that, and I don't have to, right? And if I did, I wouldn't be observing, right? I'd be critiquing or doing a commentary or something other than simply observing and reporting what happened, right? And the thing is, observation is specifically how you ground and calibrate your logic, reason, and rationality. Otherwise, you can't calibrate these things. They're not able to be calibrated. It's the observation that tells you when you're off the rails with logic, reason, and rationality. But logic, reason, and rationality don't exist in some objective material reality. That's not how it works, despite what the Eric Weinsteins of the world would have you believe, because they think they're especially good at that, which, by the way, they're also not. But they think they are, so I guess that's a plus if you're an arrogant SOB. And the way you calibrate your observation is through shared experience and participation, right? So, how do you know, gravity is sort of consistent? Well, you have to observe the world. You have to participate with it. And it's super important because it calibrates your observation and makes sure your observation matches what's actually in the world. But you can't do that if you're not participating with the world. If you're just imagining things in your head all the time and doing nothing else, or doing primarily that, you're not calibrating your observations, and your observations will stray. And it strays into fantasy, pure fantasy. In other words, you need others to help you constrain your observation to outside of you and not inside of you. You can't clearly observe the inside of you. So your observation needs to be constrained to outside of you and calibrated by others. And that's how you get validation for the line between fantasy and reality, which is outside of you. You can't be sure inside of you what's reality and what's not. Is the CIA spying on you? A car just passed by your house. How do you know? And that these are the sorts of observations that, require other people to help us work through. Because maybe the CIA is out to get you. I have no freaking idea. But that line, again, this so useful. It's a shame the comment got deleted off the video. A lot of people can't tell where they end and other things begin. And therefore, they're not reliable observers of the world. They're just not reliable observers. And that's unfortunate. And it could be true of us too. We can't tell for ourselves how reliable our observation is or where it's unreliable. Because a lot of people have very reliable observation on certain things. And then on other things, their observations are horrific, absolutely horrific. And that's a problem. And you can't do that by yourself. You can't calibrate it alone. It's not possible. It's not going to work. And the thing is, you can observe the leaf falling from the tree, but not understand what caused it. Was it the wind that broke the leaf free, or is it just fall? Right? Or is it fall and the wind? Right? Or is it something hit the tree, or there's a squirrel in the tree? Right? I don't know. Do you know how it falls? Like, do you understand that? You can just observe that it falls and not really understand gravity. Like, that's not hard. People do that all the time. And in fact, until Newton came along, people never thought about gravity. They didn't understand it or its implications. It wasn't something anyone pondered, nor did they need to. Right? Because you can just observe it and go, oh, yeah, things fall. That's nice. Right? Things fall. Something's holding me to the earth so I don't float away. I'm not a bird. I can't just overcome gravity by flapping my hands. Sure. I don't know why we need the gravity concept to figure that out, right? We don't. That's why we didn't have it until Newton. That should kind of tell you something right there. Unless you're doing something very specific, like trying to make a rocket take off from the earth or trying to invent an airplane. Your understanding of gravity needs to be basically nothing. You can just observe it. Right? You can just explain, yeah, things get drawn to the earth. Could be magnetism. Who cares? Really irrelevant. Right? Unless you're trying to fly. It just isn't all that important. And that is to say, look, observation is sufficient in many cases. Like, you just don't need to drill into the details of every single phenomena on the planet. And you can observe the hierarchy, right, without understanding the implications of the hierarchy or seeing it properly. You can say, well, yeah, of course hierarchy exists. Okay, what is it? How deep is it? How many layers is it? And where are you in that particular hierarchy? Mind explaining that to me? It's good. And, you can say like, whatever, it doesn't matter. Everybody understands hierarchy. The Protestants don't. Sola, sola, sola. What the hell's the sola about? Oh, you and one other thing, right? You and the book straight to God. But what? There's no hierarchy there. That's just a two-tiered system. It's not a hierarchy. You can state it it's a hierarchy, but you don't understand hierarchy. If you think a two-tiered system is a hierarchy, it's not. Hierarchies have depth. And where are you in it? Yeah, well, it ain't you straight through the book to God, that's for sure. And if you read the book, you'd know that, by the way, but apparently none of them Protestants actually understand the book. It's a little weird, actually, the number of things that are in that book that they just kind of gloss over. They don't understand any of that stuff. And fair enough, it's a difficult book. I don't think you can. And that's one of the problems. Like, where is the hierarchy? How is it structured? Where are you in it? How deep is it? Where are other people in it relative to you? It's a good question, right? If you're not of the right social class, trying to compete with the WEF is just a stupid idea because you can't. You also don't need to, but that's a different conversation already. A remarkably ineffective organization. Thank God for that. It's coming up in my commentary next week while I'm on vacation. You're going to love it, actually. You're going to love it. It's fascinating. Do you know that the hierarchy exists as something that impacts your life? Or is it just like an abstract concept? It goes a hierarchy out there somewhere over the rainbow, maybe. Because it's how a lot of people talk about it. They're like, they just use the term, they point to a couple of seeming examples, at least according to them, and whether or not they're correct is a whole different matter. And they move on their way, right? And they sound wicked smart, as we used to say in New England. But the thing is, you can't understand anything actually at all, any of your observations, without participating in the history of the thing. And until something has a history, you can't understand it. You can't understand ARC. It's too new. There's too many people involved, right? It has to gain momentum. That's going to be a topic I'll discuss at some point. It's on the list. And then and in that process, it has to form itself. And if it puts out another video like Eric's talk, it's not long for this world. I can tell you that. What a mess. So it doesn't really have a history. So it's hard to understand it. What are they doing? I don't know. They haven't done anything yet. But unlikely they'll ever do anything because none of those people ever do anything. They've had years and years and years to do stuff. And we know the sorts of things they're, quote, capable of, but they've already done those. Doesn't seem they can do any of the things we'll say they want to do or operate at the layers of the hierarchy they want to be operating at. That's for sure. And it's a, that's a problem. Things without a history are hard to understand. But also, if you get involved in something and you don't understand the history of it, if you don't participate in looking up the history, you're not going to understand what you're caught up in. It's not going to happen. And you're going to make lots of missteps. And you're going to make lots of suggestions that have either been tried or are contrary to the goal that you don't understand because you think you do, but you didn't look at the history of it. This is important. If you haven't looked at the history, you're never going to have an understanding. Well, what is the understanding? Like, how do we grasp this concept of understanding versus observation? Well, understanding is when you have predictive power over something. You can foresee something about it. You can talk about it, we'll say, at length. You can describe it in detail and with depth. But more importantly, you can describe how it participates with other things and how people participate within it and how maybe you participate with it or other people could participate with it. Various modes of participation. If you just say there's a hierarchy and people do what they're told from the position above them in the hierarchy, you don't understand the hierarchy at all, for sure. And while that may be a true statement to some extent, it's not true enough. It lacks a lot of the detail required to convey understanding, and it lacks predictive power because that is largely incorrect. Like the fact that the president writes an executive order doesn't mean the courts aren't going to try to stop it. It should be obvious that because this is happening all the time now, where these so-called authority relationships or whatnot are breaking down left, right, and center. But that's the problem. Like they're breaking down left, right, and center, and people aren't getting it. That means you didn't understand it before. And your understanding, however you got it, which is probably not how you think you got it, it was probably given to you by some idiot, actually, is insufficient. or perhaps completely incorrect. And that's why the chaos is increasing, because everybody thinks they know what they're doing. And then the observation of, well, everyone's LARPing is not wrong enough to say it's wrong, but it's wrong enough to be unhelpful. And that's why those issues are tough for me. I'm like, I understand why you think it's LARPing. Also, there's something way more important going on and way more significant. And the thing is, if you understand something, then you have a grasp of it that's beyond mere description as given, and more like the ability to give different descriptions from and for different perspectives and for different purposes. That's when you understand something. When you can say, oh, well, from the perspective of a worker at a factory, they're above the janitor. Not that they can order him around, because that's not how that works. But they're still above him in rank because they're more important. But they're less important than the guy that manages 20 of his job, right? The worker job. And they're less important than the director who oversees the shift, for example. And they're less important than the CEO. And the CEO doesn't talk to them directly. That's not the mode of participation for the CEO. That's not how he adds his value. Maybe he's weak. Maybe he has an illness. He can't forge stuff. That's what the worker's for. He's better at it anyway. And the hierarchy protects him from having to worry about whether or not they're going to make the numbers in the quarter. That's actually an advantage to the worker. You just do your 9 to 5, punch in and punch out. It's not a bad gig. People that can be comfortable with that are happier in their lives. That's all over the data, by the way. That's nothing I made up. It's everywhere in the data. Go look it up. It's actually everywhere, right? And near as I can tell, there's no counter data to that. People claim that, and I say, please show me the papers. I'd love to read them. And so far, my list is still 0. And that's been years and years and years now. I don't think it's going to change. Just saying. That's what understanding is, though. It's beyond mere description. When you understand something, you can replicate its effects reliably. Right? And not for all things. I mean, some things you understand and you can't implement, but one way you know you understand something, say how to program, is you can actually reliably write different pieces of software. Okay, you're a programmer. Fair enough. Right? And the thing is, it's not a mere copy, because one off, you might be able to write one program that does one thing, but then I ask you to write a different program of a different type and you can't do it. You didn't understand how to program. It's that simple. Anybody can copy something, right? But it's hard to get a true manifestation. It's very hard to do. And some people have an easier time of it than others. So, but don't copy them, because you're not them. You're not Elon Musk. Don't copy Elon Musk. You don't understand Elon Musk unless you understand that he and his brother had $750,000 to blow building and failing at companies, because that's actually important to know. If you don't know that he sleeps under his desk sometimes to make sure the work gets done, you're not going to be able to copy him sufficiently, because you don't understand what he did and how he did it. And the funny part is, I used to read, I've read a couple of Richard Branson books. So he's actually a really good autobiographer. These guys talk about what they do all the time. And then you can understand, oh, I should never try to do that because it's not within my skill range. And it never will be. Because there's lots of stuff that will never be in your skill range ever, no matter what changes in the world. Because you are a unique person. And you have unique constraints. And in order to plan something, you must understand. You must understand something about the situation. And that's why plans are best done in groups. And not all plans and not all cases, right? Sometimes you need a dictator. I was a consultant. I was a dictator. And I don't usually need the help. Thank you very much. Actually, it's a rather unique skill that I have. Almost nobody else can do that. There's a few of us out there, but of course, I was always better when I was working with the right people and they were contributing. Just like with this live stream, I would have done fine, but somebody hopped in, gave us some great feedback, incorporated it right into the notes. Right? But I didn't need that. I could have done the stream without it. It would have been fine. You would have noticed, right? Because I'm good enough for sure. I've done a few streams like completely on my own. Like that happens. They're probably not my best. So, but if you don't understand, don't start planning. And if you only understand part, be in on the planning, but have other people who understand other things help you. That's all. Work with other people, man. It's better. And the thing is, this is a good way to know if someone can come up with a plan about a specific topic or area. Do they have an understanding of it? Can they explain it from different perspectives? Can they describe it in multiple ways? Can they describe it in a way that each different perspective makes sense? Because a lot of these, internet guys who talk about things, they can't do that. I mean, that's, if you want to call it a trick, I don't particularly care to call it a trick, but it's one of the tricks. Like, okay, well, how does that work from a worker's perspective? And they give you some BS answer because they were wrong to begin with. And you're like, okay, well, you don't know what you're talking about. That's cool. And now I can move on and put my attention elsewhere. Right? It's not, I didn't give them any attention. It's that I gave them enough attention to determine where they were at in relation to me. And then I moved on. And maybe I didn't move on. Maybe I engaged because I thought I could help them or whatever. But it's a tricky thing. And the thing is, writing software is totally different from reading about writing software or watching somebody code on the internet. The considerations are different. The framing is not there when you're writing your own software. So you have to create it. Whereas if somebody sits down and goes, well, I'm going to write an editor from scratch just to show you how to write an editor. They've given you the frame. You just didn't notice because we're all stuck in this postmodern garbage. And there's no upside to postmodernism. There's no plus. There's no goodness in it. I've been asking people for decades to just tell me what the hell it is. And no one, greatest PhDs around, can't give me an answer to that one easy question. Can't answer the easy questions because you're wrong. That's it. Sorry. Maybe that's not 100% true, but it's so true that if you bet that way in Vegas, you'd be a multi-trillionaire overnight because it's that correct. Yeah, it's not 100% correct. Yeah, I'll take 90% correct all day long at the roulette wheel. All day long, buddy. I'll do 100 roulette rolls on when those odds, 99% hit or 90% hit. No problem. Maybe I'll do that. We're only in 3 days there. So then we go see Petroglyphs. Much better. And we don't even notice this framing trick people are doing. People frame things up and then they start yapping away and giving you articulate sounding explanations, in a smooth voice, or they evoke emotions and, you have to do this now or else, right? Or we all have to get off this planet. Well, why? Where can you justify that statement? I'm getting a little tired of people saying that without backing it up with any data whatsoever, because there isn't any, by the way, but all the data is there. It just shows the opposite, right? It's a little problem if that's your thesis, but hey, far be it from me, right? The thing is, understanding something to some extent is the art of making constraints and rules for the thing, but that requires understanding. If you can't define constraints or make constraints and set up rules or describe rules that are, we'll say universal to the thing, then you don't understand it. That's all. It's not that hard. It's really easy to find out when people understand stuff. This is why I talk about easy questions, right? Easy questions tell all about understanding. in a very simple way. You don't have to waste a lot of time. Right? You can easily determine if somebody has a level of understanding, and sometimes what that level of understanding is, a handful of questions. It doesn't take long. And when people don't answer questions, look, be safe. Don't engage. That's all. Do you like understand where you are in the hierarchy? Or do you just observe that there are things above you and below you? Well, there's animals down there and there's, God up there and a hierarchy. I mean, kind of sure, maybe really? Like you apply the models of the elite? Oh, this is what the elite at the WEF are doing, who were born into a circumstance that I wasn't born into. I know. Let's get the rabble involved. I know. No, you're a retard. Don't do that. Don't be a moron. What are you doing? How's that going to work? It's not going to work. Did you learn nothing from the French Revolution? See my video with Adam. Then look, you don't understand the hierarchy or scale for that matter. If you try to do stuff like that, it was amazing. I was on this, there are these Friday morning calls that I do that one of the local guys does. And one of the gentlemen was there. He's from some cryptocurrency thing. These guys are mostly crypto guys. And he was pointing out, oh yeah, it's federal legislation. Here's what it is. Some of these guys are, they dive pretty deep. He said, yeah, the banks just want clarity, so they can jump into the crypto market. One of the people there was like, well, what do you mean the banks are jumping into the crypto market, right? Because they think it's for them. And they're like, well, don't banks make fees off transactions? Isn't that how they make their money? And it's like, you do know that crypto has transaction fees, right? But they don't, because they don't think of it that way. They're thinking of it as a way to break away from banking. And it's like, no, it's just a different form of banking. And eventually the banks will have to take it over. Like why this isn't obvious to absolutely everybody is completely beyond me. I really don't understand. But that's all that's happening. But they seem to think because they don't have an understanding of what they're involved in with crypto. You can't trade in a distributed fashion and universalize the value of the currency at the same time. That doesn't work, right? Universalization of value requires coordination among centralized units. It just does. Like there's a mathematical formula for this somewhere, and I forget. It's been decades since I engaged with it somewhere, but it exists. Like this is provable on paper. It's really not that hard, but they don't even see it. And like, fair enough. Like I get that people get fooled by these things because they don't understand them. And they think they have a good observation of what crypto is. It's freedom from banks. It's like, well, no, you're just trading one bank for another. That's all that's really happening. And now you don't know which bank you're trading for. The largest stablecoin provider is not a US company. It's Tether, I guess, is not based in the US. I don't know what that means. They were all sort of like, what? We're not going to get transparency on Tether? Nope, you're never going to be able to audit their books. Doesn't matter what law gets passed in the US. Now what? Oops, you're beholden to a foreign bank. That's what happens. And they could be lying about their assets. How do you know? You'll never know. Sorry. Crypto solves nothing. But it does create a bunch of problems that didn't have to exist. So there's always that. They didn't understand it. They still don't understand it. They're involved in it and they don't understand it. And their observations of it are just incorrect. And so they're weirded out by what's happening with it. I'm like, well, I don't know. You could have seen all this coming. It's not the first, second, or third time this sort of thing has manifested. And that's, one of the more interesting aspects, we'll say, is exactly this idea around not understanding things. So a lot of people, I have this objection, right? What do we make of the idea that in order to properly observe, we must understand? Well, this cannot be true because it would create an unreasonable conflict that need not exist. And again, don't create problems that you then need to solve when you don't need to create those problems. Like there's no reason to make that statement because it can't be true and it's stupid, right? Framing is how you discern And that is what allows you to observe. Okay. So you can see the spaces between what you do understand and, where there's no understanding. And then there's understanding on, let's say, the other side, if you want to think about it in those terms, which, it's hard to think about it in any other terms. So we'll have to go with that. And if you sense something, uh, we'll say in the world that can be discerned, but maybe you don't quite understand it yet, right? Can't be understood by you. You've still made an observation, right? And then you can use analogy to think about that observation. Uh, but mere thought may never lead you to understanding, right? You really do have to participate, or even knowledge, right? Mere thought won't lead you to knowledge, or really, much else, right? It strays towards fantasy, and we love fantasy because all the novelty and nostalgia at a whim is in your head, like it's all there. Unfortunately, you can participate directly in what you observe without understanding, and you can get understanding from others in some case, at least, you know, as much as you are able to handle and as much as they are able to provide. Because some people are better at explaining things than others. You want to know something about computers? I can probably explain it to you no matter what your level. Right? It's just a skill that I have. I'm really good at explaining technology to people. I mean, that's how I made my bread and butter. I work between the IT department that speaks one language and software engineers speak a completely different language, completely different. And I just happen to know both languages and know how to figure out where people are at, give them the right level of analogy so that they have enough understanding to either calm down and move on or do the work they need to do and move on. That's all that matters. Um, Understanding is endless. So it's not like you have a complete understanding. You might have a complete enough understanding to accomplish a goal, but that's a very different statement. And it's not a subtle difference. It may seem like a subtle difference because of language, but it's not a subtle difference. And so it's that analogy, right, that can help you to get an understanding. And hopefully again, from others. Or the alternative is you can accept the observation is sufficient because it usually is for most purposes. Like most things, we can just observe them and react accordingly. Yep. And you probably do that with most things. And most of those reactions are based on exemplifications that you got as you were growing up, and they weren't taught to you in school or by a professor or from a book. And the thing is, we often fall into mimicry with mere observation. And since our observation is limited in ways we, by definition, cannot see, we run into problems when we act out what we observe in the world. Right? If you're Jordan Peterson and you observe the WEF, you act out ARC and it's a mess. Right? We need others to tell us if we're missing important parts. If we lack key details, levels of understanding, or ability to understand, there's a lot of things that, there's a lot of math I cannot understand ever. There's nothing's going to change that ever. That's okay. I can't understand a bunch of music in the right way either because I can't play a damn instrument to save my life. Right? But that's the thing. I mean, when people help you to realize that prevents you from trying to do things which you'll never be able to do. But if you don't have that ability to realize, oh, I'm mimicking something, and do I actually know what that is? No, you'll go to a talent show and not realize that you suck. Or that happens to people all the time. And again, they talk about LARPing. It's like, well, yeah, a lot of people are LARPing. Also unhelpful frame, especially with the open-ended definition. And you can watch all kinds of people follow all kinds of patterns and not understanding what patterns they're following. And the Eric Weinstein talk, I mean, he's clearly following a pattern that he perceives of Joe Rogan and a pattern or two from Jordan Peterson and Elon Musk and Sam Cedar. And to what degree he understands these things, I don't know. But like those patterns are clearly there, poorly implemented. Oh my goodness. It is a train wreck of an implementation. But I'll go over that in my video. Don't worry. But, keep that in mind. Keep the Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson, Elon Musk, Sam Cedar, write it down, man. And then when that video comes out, go look. You should be able to see it pretty quickly, actually. Like, oh, there's that piece and there's that piece and he's just smashed all this together. And if you understand his history and where he came from in particular, as like, that's what this talk is about. And I really do. Like, I think everybody should watch it because it could be that Sarah's never going to talk to me again after making her edit that. Because she was like, who is this guy? What is his problem? Why is he talking like this? And I was like, thank you. I'm glad you noticed. And she's pretty sharp. So, she's, she does a great job and she's pretty good. She was a programmer for years. Right. And the thing is, observation is how you recognize something. But just because you recognize something, or assuming you even do the recognition correctly, which a lot of people can't, even though they try, it doesn't mean you have any understanding of it. You can say lions versus foxes all day long, but when you can't define what you're talking about, you misapply it to all kinds of things based on your own definition, you clearly don't understand what you're doing. You just don't understand the concept you're using. You don't understand why that's wildly inappropriate. And then you can't answer questions that people ask that are pretty easy to answer. Even Claire Kaw had a good question. Didn't get answered. I thought it was an excellent question, especially for Claire, because usually she's just trolling. But it's something that you see in the world, right? No, Ixanon, you do not need to understand the PVK live stream. I don't know how anybody could understand that live stream. What a mess that was. It's a good laugh, and it was great for this anyway. Trying to think things through means you can't observe them. You have one mode, buddy. Like you can't do two things at once. Thinking and observing are mutually exclusive activities. Sorry. And this is important because it means just as you cannot talk and listen at the same time, you cannot think about something and observe the world at the same time because you're thinking in your head. And that doesn't mean you can't switch between them, but maybe you can't, and maybe you shouldn't, even if you can, more importantly. It's worth thinking about. Multitasking in this fashion is a lie that you tell yourself. There are other ways you can multitask for sure. There's positive multitasking, right? You can do the dishes and integrate what you've learned for the day. Like that is good multitasking. And lots of people comment on things they don't observe and haven't observed and won't observe, but they think they understand what they're talking about. But you should be able to spot this. This isn't, and it isn't necessarily bad, right? Like sometimes an outside thought through perspective on something by somebody who's never done the work before is actually helpful. It's just that A, those are vanishingly small incidents. And B, that requires a level of skill that most people will never be able to achieve. Right? But the thing is, most of these people are selling understanding. And that level of hubris is dangerous. Right? Getting up on a stage and saying, I'm going to give you a new way to think about the world, and then rambling, that's dangerous. Why ARC posted that, I'll never know. It's like, thanks for losing all credibility, dumbasses. Well done. Didn't think that was possible. So No wonder why Jonathan Peugeot is like rethinking his involvement. I guess that makes sense. And the thing is, the reason people do this is because they like to think about things because it's cheap and easy, and the damage is pretty much non-existent. Burns a lot of time though, rather than participate in them. I don't have to get my hands dirty. I can just think about how to rebuild an engine instead of actually rebuilding an engine. And only through participation can we gain so-called biblical knowledge, right? I mean, it's this type of knowledge talked about in the Bible, right? And that's possibly facilitate understanding, right? Observation only allows for a flat view of the world. So things start with observation. Observation is super important. Getting your observation right is important. You have to calibrate it with the outside world. And then once you have the observation, you can apply things like logic, reason, and rationality. I mean, that's basically the science formula, like the actual science formula, not this new science bullshit that everyone's making up a new thing that is science every other week, even though it's clearly not, right? Starts with observation, baby. Science is supposed to start with observation. I know Einstein broke that, and curse him for that. But also, we can do that. We can get back there. Like we don't have to stay lost in the Einstein myth forever. Talk about myths of World War II. There's one. There's one. The idea that you can do science without observation. It comes right out of World War II. Oh, the second act of the Great War, if you want to be actually accurate and precise about things. Trying to understand World War II is ridiculous. That actually came up last night. They had a understanding agentic AI meeting in town. It was a nightmare, and I felt tortured. And I feel like maybe I could sue and get some recompense. I don't like it when people are rude, especially when you're trying to help them. And I don't like it when they throw your friends under the bus when it's certainly not their fault. This bothers me personally. Maybe it doesn't bother you. I don't know. It bothers me though. But what came up was, what was the start of World War II? And 3 people came up with different answers, of course, because yeah, a lot of people think it was the Treaty of Versailles, because it was, by the way, but which means World War I didn't end, right? It's just 2 acts of the same war. These things, you'll never understand World War II or the myth of World War II if you think something started at World War II, because it's not. That didn't happen. Or something started with the invasion of Poland, which is the common answer. No. No, that's incorrect. All right. And another answer was, well, if you're in the US, it was the bombing of Pearl Harbor. It's like, I don't know, Germany had already declared war on us, but whatever. These things are not, so clear. And look, what do you watch out for when you're dealing with this problem of observation versus understanding, and whether or not somebody's observing the world correctly or understanding it correctly? So you watch out for simple descriptions, explanations that are specific, right? Listing or requiring too many exceptions to your rules, right? Especially if you apply them historically, then I get a little suspicious, right? You can't say, well, the news media was just fine, and then all these exceptions. No. The rot happened somewhere, and you should be able to identify that. If you don't know where it happened, you can watch The Fall of the Fourth Estate on Navigating Patterns, because I actually outline an indication of not where it began necessarily, but more like, by this point, you should have known that ship was going to sink no matter what you did, right? Because that's definitely in the video. Disconnected points, right? Just because somebody strings something together in an order doesn't mean they're connected. You need to see a thread that others also see, because you can string anything together in your imagination and say, oh yeah, this totally makes sense to me. Yeah, but does it make sense to other people in exactly the same way or a similar enough way? Because if not, the person communicating the data isn't communicating one thing. And it's actually very easy, especially using abstract terms or metaphors, to give people the impression that they heard you say a thing. The problem is the audience will hear different things. And in some cases, and I have seen this, I have measured this. It's not that hard to measure. I have measured small audiences. No two of them had even a close conception from the same talk. Brene Brown does this all the time, actually. You can watch her talks on TED Talk and YouTube and stuff. It's amazing, actually. It's, the shyster preachers use this all the time. It's a well-known tactic, actually. I don't recommend people use it, but we see it everywhere, and people are copying it without understanding it. And a lot of people are misreading. They're going, "Oh, you're preaching." Like a lot of people think I'm preaching. I'm like, no, there's a big difference between preaching and what I do, right? Peterson doesn't preach. If you don't know the difference or the differences, because there's multiple, then it's going to be a rough time. Maybe you should just defer to somebody else on that and not try to figure it out yourself. Like maybe you're not going to be there. I don't know. Because you can string things together in your head and then relate them to other things really easily. But you need other people for validation, right? That's why you don't want to rely on your imagination. You want other people to also see the same point close enough. Otherwise, you're trolling yourself, basically. And a point that is specific to you is not a point about the world. It's a point about you. And that may be useful. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, you need to be able to see yourself more clearly and stuff. Absolutely. But it's not a point about the world. And you shouldn't confuse those two things, right? Know where you end and other things begin. Don't get them confused. It won't be good. It won't be good for anybody. It won't be good for me. It won't be good for you. It won't be good for the world. People that appeal to emotions rather than linking emotions to some kind of thread of thought. Right? It's one thing to say, like, "Oh, we have to get off this planet." Why? I don't, like, what is that linked to? Is that because we're fighting right now? Are we? Are we? What is the culture war? The culture war is the moderate left and the extreme left battling each other. The conservatives don't care. They're too busy growing your food and waiting for you guys to fight it out so that they can come in and take over. Sorry, you're going to kill yourselves in the war, not anyone else. The conservatives don't care about rockets and going to Mars. And they're not going to stop you. They might even support it. That doesn't mean they support your reasoning. It just means they're happy to pat you on the head and give you a toy to play with, so you'll leave them alone. But that never occurs to people, by the way. I don't know why. Whatever. Have fun with your little culture war, your little civil war. Good luck. If you're feeling it, that's because you're in it. If you're in it, that's because you put yourself there. I don't feel it. I'm not in it, and I'm not putting myself there. Good luck. Have fun. Interjection of random feeling words is always a bad sign when you're listening to somebody. You could say, "It's the lions versus the foxes and bears, oh my." And that makes it sound like it makes a little bit more sense. First of all, I put a third item in there. Isn't that clever? And then never referenced it again. See PVK's live stream. And I made a joke. It seems like lions versus foxes is a lot more relevant now because there's an emotion associated with it, but it's random. It's not connected to anything. I didn't tell you the difference of lions and foxes and why it matters in the world, mainly because no such thing exists. There's no reasonable definition of that binary, and you can't link it to anything in the world because it's not there. It's just an imagination of somebody. It might be a shared hallucination, but I'll tell you, just from how people talk about it, you can tell right away they ain't talking about the same thing. Sorry, bro. And passionate speaking, which isn't reflected in the language, is a red flag. So you can say red flag, right? That's okay. Like, that's actually kind of a cool way to say red flag. But if you say lions and foxes, oh my, that's actually not okay. Right? Because you're adding in an emotion that doesn't belong in an explanation. It's not connected to the other things that I said. Another tell, which freaking just watched that video I put out with Eric. I mean, using a word over and over again, especially without defining it, or changing the definition over and over again, which is both of these crimes, and they're crimes. They should be punishable by actual prison with no internet. Over and over again. Like people do this over and over again. And I'm like, really? Really? And then everyone goes free speech. And I'm like, sure, until you do that, in which case I want to lock you up because you're dangerous to yourself and others. Just like a mentally ill person, because you're a mentally ill person, or you're evil, in which case I want you locked up. I don't care if your method of evil is language. That really doesn't matter. It's the evil that matters. Appeals to universal knowledge. Every child knows. What? Right? I mean, maybe there's some things like that, but like that's a red flag. You got to look out for that. Every child knows that you have to look out for that. Right? Or appeals to standards that are specific to regions. So a lot of people will throw around like, well, yeah, Western values. I got news for you, pal. You know what? There ain't Western values. That's insane. I can tell you how in 4 seconds. There's continental philosophy, there's English philosophy, and there's American philosophy. And they have 3 different axiomatic starting points, completely different, which lead to very different results. Ask me how I know, because I study history, and it's plain as day. Plain as day. Things like the line of definition of piracy or privateering, completely different in Europe and England and America. Completely different. They're not even close. Things like what's a colony and how do you obtain one? The definition of empire. This drives me nuts. Everyone's like, there's an American empire. And I'm like, I'm not saying I disagree conceptually with what you're getting at, but how are you defining empire? Because empires usually refer to something conquered. And the US does not conquer things militarily. So now you're just going to have to explain to me what you mean, because I'm not even objecting to conquer necessarily, but you're going to have to add a lot more detail, because I don't think I understand what you're talking about. And what you're talking about might be universal, in which case it's not the American empire. Right? Because that happens a lot. And not all definitions. There is a quote American empire kind of. I think it's a stupid way to talk about what you're trying to get at. But also, there's the there. And this is where people get confused. When someone's pointing at something, they're just doing a shitty job. Right? Red flag. You have to contrast these things, or they're suspect. But there's definitely no such thing as Western values. There's a general set of values that seem to be the same in Western worlds. But even like how countries allocate their tax dollars is vastly different. Why? Because they have different values. And again, you can identify a cluster of values in the West that's contrasted with the East. Absolutely. But that doesn't mean there's a cohesive set of values in the West and a cohesive set of values in the East. That's not at all what that means, because if you dig in, that's not what you're going to find. Like right down to the treatment of the workers. Like the way people in China treat workers and the way people in India treat workers and the way people in Malaysia treat workers, these are all really different, man. And the prison systems, ooh, there's another tell. Like these, what are you talking about values? They're not that similar. My goodness. And there's some bleed over, right? There's some stuff that's sort of like, well, we're just going to take this, even though it's in conflict with our values, right? Because countries do that. Like, people are very sensitive to mimicry and exemplification, and they don't know it, right? Like, we don't know what drives us, and so you got to watch out for that stuff. So that's my little rant. How did I? Oh, geez, that went much longer than I thought it would. Oh well, it doesn't matter. Anselman started off okay, then went downhill. Yeah, no, it didn't start off okay. It started off with an agenda and went straight into that agenda over time. Oh yeah, Flying to the Moon. I read that. I read those too. Okay. Lighting. What else we got? Navigating patterns is greater than the Mark Lefevre show. That's true. It's very true. It really is. What do you have against arrogant SOBs? I lived in Boston. I don't know. Is that hard? Like, I know all these people. They're archetypal. Like the MIT guy, right? Like, even if you didn't go to MIT, they're totally archetypal. Completely. RJ, I observe a miscommunication, but that doesn't make me understand what they are observing. Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, you don't understand what caused the miscommunication necessarily. You may think you do too, which is even worse. Like, when you think you understand something and you don't, that's what we're living in. Everybody thinks, well, I have knowledge and therefore I have understanding. And it's like, no, you have information. You don't have any knowledge, and you really can't understand it because you're not participating. You can't understand politics. You're not in politics. You'll never understand politics. You don't understand the backroom deals that people are doing to get their own agendas crossed because they think it's a reasonable trade-off. You're not in the room. Like, that came up today. So what somebody asked, like, who wrote these crypto bills? And the guy said, oh, it was the assistants for all of these congressmen. And she was like, yeah, but who wrote them? And he was like, do you need like names? Because I don't know. There were like well over 100 people, and I advised on some of them, but I wouldn't say I wrote any of them. And we were just like, that's an insider. He's in politics. He's in Congress. Like, he's there. He's not a congressman, but he works for one, right? Like, what a ridiculous question from his perspective, right? She thought it was a great question. I was like, what a dopey question. Who cares who wrote it? What difference does that make? Anselman, the Calvinists have their ruling elders and magistrates. They have lots of things, but they don't cop to any of it. And it's still sola, sola, sola. RJ, how do we look at history if we burned all the books? Is Mark observing Revelation? Oral tradition, my friend. We don't need books. Books are bad for you. Anselman, you should look more fully into the various Protestant traditions. They don't have any because they don't last. They change constantly. Like, no church lasts more than a generation. And you would see they have their own hierarchies. Yes, hierarchy is inevitable. Everything has a hierarchy. This really isn't. The sun rises in the east and gravity holds me to the earth. Like, it's worth a chuckle. It was, RJ. I agree. Ixnat, communication and mediation go up and down. Well said, sir. That they do. That they do indeed. Anselman, they replaced Pope and king with ordained ministers, elders, and king. Well, but they didn't replace them because they got Parliament on top in England, for example, and Scotland and Ireland. So they didn't. They just tried to manifest a deeper hierarchy and failed miserably, even though they actually left a much deeper hierarchy that accounted for the king, which would have necessitated his removal, which you didn't do. That was done by the East India Company, and they destroyed the world. The egalitarian sects, Anabaptists, diggers, ranchers, etc., are a minority of Protestants. Mainstream Protestants, hierarchical. Everything is hierarchical. I don't understand your point. Oy vey, trying to consult with no cooperation is a death sentence. Well, unless you're getting paid by the hour, in which case you don't care. Do the thing. Yes. The French are to blame. I also don't think there's any good French mathematicians, but that'll make more sense later. I only got so far in university level math. Yeah, I was bemused at the ease at which some went went way beyond me. Well, that's the thing. We all have our thing, right? And this is what really bothers me. So there's all these people talking about AI, and I'm like, I know one thing about you. You've never coded a neural net in your life. I can tell you that, because I have, and you can just tell by how you're talking about these things that Nassim Taleb, who he might have coded, he must have coded some stuff. He's really clever, but he was like, AIs are big statistical machines, and I'm like, yeah, pretty much. It's actually technically completely correct, and therefore, they'll never be sentient. That is for sure, for sure. This isn't that hard to figure out, but apparently people love to sell dreams, which is one thing Elon Musk does, by the way. See my video on Elon Musk, because I go over that there. Ixnay, do I need to understand the PVK, what the PVK live stream is talking about? You don't need to understand the PVK live stream to use it in yours, or to exemplify the fact that those little cults are exactly going the way I said they'd go. They muted me 3 different times with a bunch of excuses, accused me of doing all kinds of things I absolutely was not doing. Meantime, Sally Joe's in there absolutely trolling ever living crap out of them. I mean, legitimately, but they wouldn't silence her. I'm like, man, she's Sally and I are talking on the Discord. I'm like, what are you doing? Now I have to respond. This is too juicy. So yeah, I mean, that's the thing. You can't understand the PVK live stream. It's a mess. They're just lions and foxes and bears, oh my. And it's like, what are you guys talking about? And they're all insane. That's the other problem. Sally Joe, lion and foxes cannot be understood because it's metagelical. Yes, that's correct. Never truer words were spoken on this planet. Anselman, cats are jellical. That's true. That's true. That is true. Jellyfish are jellical. I don't know about that. I'd have to. I'm not a jellyfish expert. Anselman, not a coding tool possum. It's not metagelical, throwing things together randomly. Well, metagelical is an attempt to make your tribe bigger. Well, this person's metagelical like me, and that person's metagelical like me. They're doing what I'm doing. I'm doing what they're doing. It's just bigger tribe. Right. And also justification for noticing that you're stuck in a pattern that you don't understand. You're trying to copy Jordan Peterson. You don't know what he did. You think you do, though. So that just makes it worse. And then you've got people running around being upset that somebody's making true statements in the world and calling it parental advice. I'm like, I didn't give any parental advice. What are you talking about? Parental advice. When have I ever given anybody parental advice? Seriously. I mean, other than telling Sally Joe that more beatings are required for her child, which, I still stand by, but it's rather specific to her, by the way. So, RJ, across Jellian sounds iffy. Well, maybe. RJ, indefinite pronouns are the bane of the English grammar. I don't know about that. Is that true indefinitely? Ixnay, maybe the Great War started with the international contract law put in place because the people rebelled against the international church. Well, funny you mentioned that. That was certainly a factor, but more likely it started with everybody trying to copy Napoleon, right? His success through precision really kicks off materialism. That's really the beginning of the materialism, is Napoleon's look at the successes of materialism and maths. Basically. But that is also what you point out as a big factor, is putting contract law in place of the church relationships for holding us together. We substituted contract law relationships. And then, of course, those are subject to interpretation. And then for some weird reason, much like what's happening right now with Ukraine, everybody decides to interpret these contracts in a way that will lead to war, which is mysterious, unless, of course, you understand spirits, in which case you go, well, of course. RJ, I observed Mark isn't reading chats, but I don't understand why. Well, because I was trying to focus on my notes and you guys were having a fine time. But he could be, I don't know. I was glancing at them. Don't worry. That's how one's observation is constrained. Yeah, you can't really see into my head. And the thing is, I can read chats here or here. And I often turn my head when I'm talking, because I turn my head when I'm talking. I move around. So yeah, it's impossible by observation to figure it out. It's not at RJ. I don't understand why Mark does or doesn't read chat during the monologue. Yeah, I pick up the ones that I think are most relevant when I observe them and have time to process them. Sometimes I read them and I go, I ain't processing that right now. I'm on my thing. Go away. So that's actually what's happening. RJ observing his monologue mayhaps. Well, that too. Sally Joe, not caring about the emotional safety, not making space for diversity. Yeah. Yeah, those are good tells as well, for sure. I keep observing regardless. Thanks, X9. We deserve to be observed. No, you don't. Do we understand what we deserve? That's a better question. I'll have to do that with a live stream. One must observe to discern such matters. I'm glad you guys are having fun. Ansem, and be careful what you ask for. Individual does not equal individualism. Just saying, you keep saying that. Watch your own redefinition. I don't know, Anselman. Did I screw that up? I might have. I was doing the notes, and man, I had to be wicked careful with language. I'm like, ooh. I do screw up occasionally. That's true. I ain't perfect. Children don't know what to watch out for. Well, that's true. Actually, my comment that was parental advice was, formation is a thing. If you don't form your children, the people in the schools will. And that's apparently parental advice because some people are that dumb or angry and resentful over something that didn't even happen. Different problem. Anselman, we had a government introduce their concept of British values, which does not derive from British culture and its Christian basis. This is why you can't talk about values in the abstract, right? You need to refer to them in the specific. And the confusion of the general for the specific is absolutely everywhere. And when you want to justify values in the land of the propositional tyranny, which we're still living in, everything just gets messy. RJ, parliaments are inferior forms of hierarchy. Confirmed. Well, parliaments have a place in governance. It's just not the place they're in now, which is replacing the king in the case of England. And that's not a place for parliaments. It's really not. But understanding the difference between observation and understanding really helps you to know who's full of shit and who isn't. And I'm not saying they're like deliberate about it. I also don't care because I'm a pragmatist. And the fact that you're not deliberate about something is a real recipe for disaster because it's a lot easier to spot a malicious act or somebody with a specific chip on their shoulder or a goal that they've been pursuing for years, right? And they just keep morphing how they're presenting it, than it is to spot somebody who sincerely thinks they're like doing the good thing and then keeps morphing as the result, because the thing that's morphing them is usually, roughly speaking, a demon, right? Like it's a bad thing, usually, not always, but almost always. And yeah, that discernment's really important. Look, if you want to join, I'm posting the link. Feel free to come on up, and hopefully we can stick more or less to the topic, but we can stray a bit. It's fine. I don't want to get into a bunch of personal stories, we'll say, but it's it was so handy having people jump in and help out with the notes and remind me what I was working on, because my brain is mush today. Especially because I had to go out and deal with beavers, and I don't know what goes on. Sometimes when I'm moving around, it stirs up a bunch of stuff and my brain gets fuzzy. That's why it's easier if I just stay in my office all day and sit down, unfortunately, which is not good for me. But hey, a 20-minute walk across the yard with a bunch of raking is more than I can handle some days, apparently. Some days you go 3 hours and work in the yard, but some days a 20-minute walk and I'm ruined. Oh man, I observe Castle, what I have a very good understanding of. Good to see you, sir. How you doing?
See you. No, I'm doing good. I was observing your monologue. Understood it very well, I think. Well, we're about to find out, I'm sure. But
You would have. You and Ixnon are great, and Jesse. You guys all understand the work really, really well. You've really done your homework and taken the time to go through the history and everything. So I do appreciate that.
it's good fun. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff here. Like I feel like I'm under a microscope here. I'm observing myself very closely right now. Is
Well,
there another? Yeah.
I didn't talk about that, but yeah, I mean, there's such a thing as too much observation, right? Like at some point you have to participate. And that is that third state, right? Because you can observe, you can understand, or you can just participate and not worry about either, actually. You can just
Right.
like go with the flow and I mean, at some level, how well do you understand the wisdom community book? Right? Because right, like well enough to edit it for sure.
Right.
Like there's no question about that. But like, you didn't know where I was going with most of that. You had no idea.
It clicked. Like as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, I see where he's going now. But yeah, and there's a lot of stuff that I'm going back and yeah, I mean, I've been getting absolutely slammed to your early point about the chaos, but I'm staying out of the flood, barely, right? But I'm still out of there. I remain afloat, just barely, and but that was the thing. I was like, I started over. I guess just for the folks at home, I started from the beginning editing because it had been a while since I saw the old content, so I wanted to re-observe where we had kind of gone because I was looking at the later chapters for a while. I was like, let me reground myself, reread the whole thing, consider this final review until we've got it actually properly formatted and everything on those chapters. And then that way, the voice is consistent and everything, which so far, like it is, and it's very good. And there's a lot of stuff I forgot was in there. I was like, oh, this is it got me more excited to edit. And then I got completely slammed like all day and zero amount of time to do anything. But it's even still like the juice is still there. So that's exciting, but it's probably going to be a next week thing realistically. But there's some things lining up. I think come Wednesday, we should be looking pretty good. But yeah, and also with your trip coming up and everything, that'll probably be my opportunity to just jump on this and
assuming I finish that last stupid chapter in the next 2 days. This is my plan.
Even if you don't, I'm gonna start putting stuff into the official formatting, and so that we can at least see the first few chapters. And I think it's gonna come out looking really nice, and that should be good inspiration.
I'll get it done on the plane or something, for sure. So it'll be done. It'll be done by the end of Sunday, I'm sure. But
yeah. But yeah, it's really good stuff. But to the point of like understanding it, like on one hand, I don't have to in some way. Like there's a lot of things that we even have a bit in there where it says there are certain concepts in here that you're not bound to. I'm paraphrasing, but you're not bound to use exactly these. Like it might be necessary to modify or even reject some of these depending on your circumstances. So you actually don't have to understand. Like you can read the whole thing and still miss a few things because maybe they weren't relevant to you, or maybe they'll become relevant at a later stage. They're just not relevant right now. And so like the understanding comes with the implementing and participating in it. So, but I was thinking about that as I was driving, listening to the beginning of your monologue. I was thinking about this with respect to driving. Right? I was like, I don't think. There was also a video that got shared in the Discord thing, and it was talking about like procedural tyranny or something like that. And I was like, there's a lot of that in driving when you just start driving. Like if you're taking your driving test, like there's a lot of procedural and propositional tyranny involved in learning how to drive, but you don't think about it. The same thing for like cooking a big meal for friends and family or something like that. Like, yeah, if you have to follow the recipe and stuff, then yes, you're being tyrannized by the box of stuffing, that is telling you what to do.
You could look at it that way. Yeah. If you want. Like this is the problem.
But then you'll just be sad. Right. Like you'll be miserable the whole time. And like I know what it's like to be miserable cooking, but also it's possible to spend 6 hours making a perfect pumpkin pie and not be miserable at all, like for a single minute of it. And like I understand both perspectives because like I was in those different frames at different times.
Right.
And
right.
so, and there is that nice contrast across time as well of here's some things that by participating and then participating in other things that exact onto this, that I get better understanding. And there are things that I got from cooking certain things that I was able to go out and apply that to things that seemed more or less irrelevant. And yeah, I mean, that's just, but actually making actions in the world, like that's, you know, so I was also thinking about this because, of course, you picked this particular topic this week because I was thinking about this exact topic and a few of the things around it for most of the week. And one of the things that I was thinking about was this thing of, you know, like conversations are not the same as actions and everything.
Yeah.
And like people want to just, they want to observe the PowerPoint presentation, you know, and assume that they've made an action. And I see that, I've seen that in departments at places I worked. We'll get a department that's all about planning and doing projects and stuff like that. And they're the least productive people of all, and they spend most of their time in meetings. And I'll even hear someone who was in that meeting, but not part of that team, but was like kind of participating so they could relay information. And then something won't happen. And they'll say, we literally talked about this for like half an hour. And like, how did that get missed? Like we spent most of the meeting doing that. It's like, well, you know, there's a certain bit of observing so long that you assume that you did something.
Right. Yeah. Well, it feels like you did because it's easy to stray into fantasy.
And you're expending, you know, your time and your energy and your attention. Like all of those things are draining as you're doing it. So, you know, it's like, well, it would feel something like that if I were actually doing something. So it's close enough.
Right.
Oh.
Right. And by, you know, this topic this week, you mean 10 hours ago when I actually picked this one off the list.
Yeah.
This was not known about in advance. Sally Joe, information is not always useful. Right. Yeah, most information is completely useless. Right. Almost all the information you ever have access to is thoroughly uninteresting, unimportant, and unhelpful. But, you know, if you let it flood you, which you can just flood yourself with details from the JFK papers, apparently, and find your pet theory. It was aliens. It was Mossad. It was the CIA. It was Cuba. Like, apparently all that's in there, according to what I'm reading. I'm like,
it's all of them all at once. It's like murder on the it's like Murder on the Orient Express. It was everybody got a piece.
Yeah. Well, people are shocked to realize that the CIA actually does things compartmentalized. It's not one group of coherent people who are all working towards a goal that they say understand, because that's how the military works, you idiots. Yeah, it's one of those things. I'm like, I'm glad you had this revelation this late in life, you idiot.
I mean, even in a retail environment like that is more or less understandable. Like
right.
most of the people, you know, like in my late teens working at Staples, like the people who were working at the copy and print shop had no idea what the guys doing the normal office supply stuff were doing. And they had no idea what the tech guys were doing. And no one had any idea. No one knew what the managers were doing. You know?
Including the managers.
Right.
Been there, done that. Yeah, good managers are worth their weight in gold. Yeah, no one realizes it.
Yeah, and to your previous point as well of the value of the people that are at the different layers of the hierarchy. Like you still need the other ones, but it's like, you know, it's a little bit more difficult to, like, you can swap cashiers all day long, and in fact they do. Like again, if you look at a retail environment, like they are constantly turning over cashiers.
Even managers can take over the cashier duties.
Exactly. Yeah. I wasn't a cashier, and I spent an enormous amount of time running the registers. I was really good with the little scan gun and everything. I take people's stuff and I lay it all out, and then I just do, you know, like the old Red Dead Redemption Deadeye thing.
I was gonna say too much Duck Hunt in the day, but you're
exactly
too young for that. It's Red Dead.
I played a little.
Redemption was great. What a great game! I'm gonna fire that up now. I haven't played that.
It was really good. Yeah, the second one was great too, because it's a prequel actually. But yeah, the stories on those are good. I mean, there are dangers related to the video that came out. You know, if you lack moderation, there are dangers with something of that type. But in terms of overall quality, it's, you know, cinematic quality pretty well.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I am shocked that video did not get more hate. My video games video, I thought for sure was just gonna get absolutely flayed. Nope, nope. We're over 80
it,
views, but like
it
it's
seemed
relatively
very
quiet.
reasonable to me. I mean,
Yeah, well, it was a new perspective. Like when I talk to
yeah,
people, they don't think of it in any of those perspectives, and I'm like, really?
yeah,
This is the most important part, and you guys are missing, you know, the important part. But you know, who knows? We'll see. We'll see. I did tag Peugeot on it and said like, would love to talk to you about this in
oh
terms of
yeah,
symbolism. Yeah, well, we'll see. I think it would be a good, fruitful conversation because I've never
yeah,
done that before. Right?
that would be fun.
That was a trigger item for me. I'm like, no, I think now would be the good time to talk to him.
Was that Matir?
No, Jonathan.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know
Mature would be
Matir.
tougher because I don't think he plays video games.
He does.
I mean, he does a little bit, but
So-
like not.
Well, I mean, he lives in the forest, but as
He
far as
lives
I'm
in a
aware,
yurt, yeah, with
yeah,
possibly with no electricity from the looks of things. So
maybe right now when it warms up a little bit, he might be back to it. I don't know.
good for
But
him.
I heard tell he likes funny enough, he likes survival crafting games, which is basically what he's doing in real life.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, and I think that's one of the things too is that you end up okay. So there's a handful of things that again I was like, it's annoying, but also very kind of entertaining. That you know when I said that you picked the thing you pointed out, it's only been the topic for 10 hours, but I've been working with a couple of concepts that have just been on my mind for the entire week, basically. And one of them was actually understanding versus comprehension. And that's a big one that I think a lot of people miss because comprehension, like the comp is the same comp as in complete. So like you can understand stuff all day long and not comprehend you can stand under it and get a certain perspective from beneath.
That's right.
And then, which is actually in the book as well. But there's there's a little section on that in the early chapters. But and not being able to get the top down view very well. So you can't fully comprehend something. And there is you end up running into this thing where people kind of say like, oh, you can't speak on this particular subject or something like that because you don't have this sort of thing. It's like, well, you can have a limited understanding from one perspective, at least, like, and to assume that by maybe even some sort of credential that you fully comprehend something, like it must be a very limited field then if you're not constantly learning something new about it. There's, I mean, whatever it is, there's usually some sort of thing you need to keep up on,
Right. Yeah.
So
comprehend. There's the problem is there's so many pieces and I never know. Like it takes me a long time to figure out like where are you guys lost? Like as a group, right? It's a lot easier when you're talking to an individual. It usually takes me a couple minutes to figure out like, oh, I need to go down this path and figure out these things. But when you're talking about large groups of people, it's like, where's everybody having confusion to this week? Like what's happening and I'm getting quicker at it, so that's good. But also, it's just a pain. And what does this tie into, and why does it matter? And showing people that because you never know what they're missing, and so you say things, and they just don't get it, right? Like I mean, I still insist that, man. I tell people like, no. I went to a Catholic school. And I took ethics because they let me. And by they, I mean everybody, right? The state, the school, and my parents. They all had to like do that, right? And then allow me to quote my freedom. And of course, rebellious teenager, it's junior high, right?
Right.
And then what happens is I read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and they ask me, like, what does Aslan remind you of? And I'm like, I have no idea. Are you okay? Like, do you need like some medication? Can I get you some water? Like, did you overheat? Like, I don't know what you're talking about right now. And then he says Jesus, and I'm like, well, I don't know, maybe, I guess. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. And then people don't get this. The fact that somebody could go to a Catholic school from a heavily Catholic family, effectively, although we didn't go, but the grandparents, yeah, right? And that can still happen.
Right.
That should tell you a lot about the depth of the problem, right? Meaning crisis, my tail. That's the least of your problems at that point. Like,
Yeah.
wow. But people, it doesn't hit them. And I'm always like, how is this not a nuclear weapon in your mind? But it's not. They just can't make the connections.
Yeah. Well, they can't understand,
Right.
That's one of those things where, because like I experienced this going to Catholic school essentially my entire life and receiving essentially no religious formation. And part of that was because my parents were a mixed religious marriage, and my father actually denied me religious formation. So it was like the most secular Catholic schools possible. I basically got the same curriculum that everybody else got, at the public schools or whatever, even though it was a private school, but it was,
Right.
California State Board, it's all the same no matter where you go. But yeah, I mean, that was one of those things where I actually didn't realize all of the stuff that I was missing is actually a much greater, complete denial, I guess, of opportunities and benefits than I could have possibly imagined. But that's one of those things that I was thinking about this when, with the whole thing of the procedural tyranny and all this stuff. Over the last week and a half, I've been slowly crawling through the original document from Vatican II because it got referenced in my little Lent book. And I was like, oh, I'll check that out. So I've been reading it really slow, like a person could probably read it in an hour and a half, realistically, maybe less. But I've been going real slow to just as if I was editing it. Like, is there anything that? And I gotta say, like, from my perspective, airtight. And what I'm getting is people skip steps or just flat out didn't read it or didn't comprehend it or just did the individualism thing and said, I'm going to do what I want to do. Because every single thing in there, it actually even lays out the steps for how you're supposed to organize sub-hierarchies so that they can have checks and balances and stuff and how they can organize with each other. And like getting various people at the different levels of the hierarchy to participate in this, running experiments and how to isolate them.
Really?
Like, it's explicit in the text of the document. And I'm like, I didn't see anybody do this. Like, and you make the point a lot of times of like, oh, we can go back. Like, you can literally just treat this like it's a brand new document that someone just typed up right now. And like, you just do it.
Back. Yeah.
Like, you just do it right now because it's a workable plan. Like, there's nothing stopping you from actually just implementing this, and you can do it for free. Like, you can actually do it for $0.
It's a good point. Like, that's the clearest example of we can go back is Trump's executive orders.
Yeah, exactly.
And everyone's like, "Oh my God, he's doing these unprecedented things," and I'm like, "Well, first of all, how do you think we got here with executive orders? And we can go back." Like, it's not that hard. Like, we can go back to doing the things you thought we had been doing all along, but we really weren't, right? Like, we can go back, and we should because we're on a bad path. So but that is what it is. It's this bias away from going back that Vervaeke in particular is just completely guilty of, and just people thinking that way, and it's like, you have to stop thinking that way. But they're all leftists. I'm sure it's a random coincidence, and it's nothing causally to do with it. But it's ridiculous. It's completely ridiculous.
Yeah. Did you see the congressional address that he did? Like, when he started laying out like a bunch of those, I pretty much never watch like just news. Like, I don't read or look at or even commentary on news or any of that stuff. Like, pretty much never. I used to. That was the one thing that I've actually watched in a very long time. And I also very infrequently watch TV, and not something that I have against it. It just don't get around to it. And that was some quality TV, I gotta say. Like, it was when he's just listing off all of the executive orders, and then like points out why he did it, and then looks at the people who like he's making the corrections on and everything is extremely entertaining. But also, like, you see a lot of the extreme corruption that he's pointing out. And I mean, he does a whole bit, like, it's basically a comedy bit at this point, because he's reading off Social Security statistics and talking about, like, the age at which there are people and, like, how many there are collecting Social Security checks. And he's listing off the ages in ascending order. And he's, like, listing off thousands that are over the age of 200. And I think at the end, he listed one person that was 360 years old or something like that. And it's just like, yeah, we're going to have to, like, knock Dracula off Social Security or something like that. Because there's otherwise, like, just, and it was a lot of them. So I just thought, oh my goodness, like, that just reminded me of when I was taking phone calls as part of that call center when they did the stimulus check stuff. And you would get people that would call that were on Social Security, and they say, hey, I'm getting $50 a month or something like that, like 75 years old, getting $50 a month. And it's like, man, and then here's Dracula pulling in, who knows how much, it's just, but yeah, I mean, there's that stuff where that is also a consequence, I think, of people not observing enough. Like,
Right.
that was, it only took like 3 weeks of people
Well,
actually
they think
looking
they
at that.
understand how it works. So
Yeah.
they never need to look at it and find out if it's working that way. That's the
Yeah.
danger of thinking you understand something. It's actually the danger of understanding something, is when you understand something too well, you stop observing it.
Yeah.
But observation is the basis of understanding. And when you lose that connection, you lose that ordering, then it's a big problem. And I like what Ixnon says here. But Mark, going back sounds regressive and progress is good. Yeah, it's the progressive. Spot a progressive every time, because they'll say we can't go back. That's you're a progressive. And all I'm going to say is they used to burn witches at the stake for a reason. And I think I know what that reason is. That's just two completely unconnected statements. Don't read too much into them or anything, even though they're not unconnected at all. But yeah. Anyway.
It was like, I had an alto saxophone instructor one time talk about how he met his hero, that this guy, some famous jazz musician, everything. He met the guy, and I think he even got to play with him on a stage and everything. He was super, super stoked, very old saxophonist. And he said, when I met the old guy, and I saw him behind, in the back of the stage, and we talked a little bit, I saw him looking at a children's scales book, like just the kind that you would give to like an 8-year-old that was just picking up the thing. And he was just looking at the scales. And this is a guy that does extremely complex, like, saxophone solos and stuff, and just incredibly high level. And he said, hey, like, he didn't want to, like, get on the guy's business or anything, but he said, hey, like, what's the deal with the, he just kind of expecting something a little bit more. And he said, I review. Like, just, and it's like, it's a re-observation. Like, he's looking over the fundamentals and everything before he goes out and implements the high level stuff.
Right.
And it's just like, it's the same thing as, like, you check that your socks aren't wet if you're out and about, and, on a hike or something like that. There's just like, just review the low things, just give them a little bit of attention and make sure that everything is in order before you go out and do the complex stuff, Yeah,
exactly. No, it is. It's super important too. It's good to observe things, make sure, recalibrate your understanding with some observation, right? That the understanding causes a lot of arrogance. And I mean, I'm constantly, like, even though I'm not planning on sort of going back into software full time, I'm constantly talking to people. What are you doing? Like, how do you do this? And how are you doing that nowadays? Right. Same with the DevOps work. I'll talk to people like, how you guys doing this nowadays? Because it changes. And sometimes the changes are cosmetic and sometimes they're not. A lot of stuff is not, we'll say, as cosmetic as you might think. And it's significant.
Yeah.
And it's good to be able to say spot progressives. I want to see what Sally said back here. But working, what you don't know. Not working, what you quote know, because you're too inexperienced to know that you don't know. When you don't have
Right.
participation and you're not constantly failing at things, you're not learning anything, and you just think you know things, when in fact it's not possible that you know them. Because biblical knowledge is the only real knowledge, and that's participation.
Yeah.
It's participatory type knowledge, if such a thing exists, which it probably doesn't, but it's a handy enough short form, so we'll allow it.
It's like the thing, I really like, and this is something that I have done a lot with the concepts that you put out in your videos, and that I've started going out, and when I find useful stuff, like I kind of picked up this skill that now exaps to a bunch of other stuff. And it's the whole act of like trying something on, that it's, here's a frame or something like that. Let me try it on. And then I'm just going to see, because it doesn't have to apply universally. And like, that's also useful to find out like, this is just a screwdriver. Like if it doesn't apply, then that's fine. It goes back in the box. But just taking certain concepts and then just kind of saying, how well does this map to a bunch of the other stuff, and how useful can I actually make it? And that is a certain type of participation, especially if you're actually doing stuff with it, or if you're trying to extract that information so that you can use it to do stuff. And there was something that I've, like this week, I heard a definition, and I've just been trying it out on a bunch of different things, and I'm finding that it maps on a lot, but especially behaviorally. So it's this definition that is malice, because you mentioned malice and like the person before, like a malicious actor that pursues a goal for years, and that they're like possessed by this thing and they need to constantly serve that at the expense of other stuff. So the definition is malice is choosing a lesser good in place of a greater one. And so, and I was looking at that and it's like, that's a really simple, and it doesn't directly imply evil, right? Like it's just, this person they just chose something that was less and everything. But if you do that and you make a habit of consistently doing that, like you can pretty rapidly reciprocally narrow if you keep choosing the bad choice every time.
Right.
And you're not looking up, because if you're looking at just the one thing and it's like, I'm pursuing this goal of, getting a higher place in politics or something like that, for example, and then you're doing that like everything is a constraint against you like achieving that goal, that there's no looking beyond it. You're constantly making sacrifices for that goal and then not reorienting yourself. You're just hyper focused, like horse blindered on this thing. And then and so I was just looking at this and I was like, oh goodness, like especially now during Lent, I was like, that's actually kind of going to be kind of like a mid-Lent pivot that I'm making, where I'm like, let me focus on, and then just kind of in perpetuity, because one thing people, especially Catholics, actually don't understand is that you're not supposed to end at Lent. Like you're actually supposed to, that's the time that you really focus on something that you're then going to use as a tool for the rest of the year, or maybe even for the rest of your life. This is just the chance that you kick it up a higher notch, and then you find out if you actually learned something. Now, I heard about a guy that he did the 40-day fast, and he had some extra weight on him and everything like that. He did electrolytes and all this stuff, and this was a few years back. But he did that, and he made it through like 41 and a half days or something like that. He successfully did it. He lost like 56 pounds or something like that.
Wow.
And then you're supposed to, slowly ease yourself back into food. Right. And the whole idea behind the fast is not to lose 56 pounds, although not a bad deal. But the whole deal is that it's to get the self-control over being able to say yes or no to food. But the guy finishes the fast, loses all the weight and everything, and then like within a day or two, he finds that he can eat pretty comfortably. So he eats an entire pizza and half a chicken. And it's just like, you learn nothing. 41 days later, you lost 41 days, but also, and 56 pounds, again, not a bad deal, but the goal was not achieved because you're really just, doing it on the natural level. And that's fine. Like that's still, you weren't doing it to pick up these, an ethereal virtue or something like that. But there are consequences to consistently doing that. And that's the thing I think that I was kind of mapping onto the video game video that you had, where it's like, there are times when entertainment is actually a greater good than whatever the alternative is.
Mhm.
That is a limited amount of time in your week,
It's rare.
you
Yeah.
know. Yeah. And I do find, but it's interesting that I have found that in terms of entertainment, my entertainment is actually moderated for me by my attention to all the stuff that's really important that I have to attend to. And
Mhm.
so I've now observed, and then I now understand the stuff that if I don't do it, this is going to have negative consequences. And also, if I do it, this is going to have positive consequences. If I attend to all of those things, it actually moderates the amount of time I have for any entertainment at all. And then I don't even have to think about it. And then so at that point, it winds up being a sort of refinement process of, that lady, um, she's like 3 feet tall, that Marie Kondo that did like the tidying up with
Yeah,
Code
yeah.
Marie thing, where she goes and she does the thing where she's having people sort through their clothes and says, oh, does it spark joy or not? She has an interpreter. They can't actually understand her. And but they say, does this spark joy? If it does, then you keep it. And then if you're not sure, you keep it in a pile and you'll look at it later. And then if it doesn't, then just throw it away. And just kind of looking at that, where it's like, well, oh, I have like 2 hours every 3 days for entertainment or something like that. Like that's kind of how my weeks have been going. And a lot of times I wind up having to do some sort of impromptu chore in the middle of that. So it's just like, so I have to have extremely discriminating tastes in order to make the most out of that time. And so in a sense, because you need entertainment, you don't need that much, but there's a certain amount. You don't want to be consuming trash. And so there is an opportunity there to refine your YouTube subscriptions, what movies you're planning on watching. If there's games that you're going to plan to play, only get the ones that are actually that spark joy, and not in a way that's like, addictive, like, because everyone knows that if there's something that it's the same feeling as if you binge a TV show that was trash or whatever, that you realize like, oh, that was wasted time. Like that just stole from me. Yeah.
Don't watch Lost or Game of Thrones.
Right.
Yeah.
Any
of that
with those.
Yeah. I want to catch up on comments real quick. Ixnat also attending to lesser things as higher things is disorienting. Yeah. Yeah. It's not only disorienting, but I mean, it also does something to you. Right. And yeah, it really does narrow you out. Sally Joe, distraction from pain allows you tolerance. That is not good. Yeah, exactly. Like when you're sort of flooding yourself with enjoyment or candy or whatever, it can distract you from your depression, which might be an important signal that you need to make a change in your life, or your pain, which might be an important signal you need to stop doing that. So you keep, so you don't re-injure yourself over and over again. And then Sally again, Marie Kondo is a really great help. Hoarding weight distractions. Stuff all an issue of virtue and vice. Yeah, well, there's a lot of vices, right? But the problem is, like, you do need distractions, right? You do need to save certain things, you do, right? It's just those things. It's not that they have to be done in moderation. That's actually incorrect. Just much like entertainment, you don't do your entertainment in moderation. You do your entertainment rarely. You do your distraction rarely. Right? So you have to moderate it, but it doesn't go to the middle, right? It goes to the bottom.
Right. Yeah.
It's
almost as if there's like, maybe a day dedicated throughout the week, one specific one for just doing useless things.
But look at this. Ixnat also don't watch Wheel of Time. No, sorry, dude. But let me explain to you how this works. Okay. Because I had an insight like today about Wheel of Time, thanks to Sally, because she was talking about it. I went, no, that's not how it works. It works this way, right? But first and foremost, Ixnat, Rosamund Pike. Okay, I'm just going to leave that there. Okay, last name. Just observe the last name. Second, understanding, what's attractive about these things and what they're saying is important, because I'm trying to figure out, like, what is the attraction of Wheel of Time? And then, like, Sally said something today, and I was like, no, that's not it at all, right? There's no lineage in Wheel of Time because you don't need lineage. If time is cyclical in that way, there's no reason to have a lineage. You don't need to be the son of a hero of the Horn. If you were a hero of the Horn, there's no reason to be. There's no, like, there's, right. And that's but the concept of the wheel or any kind of Ouroboros or cyclical time automatically destroys lineage as a factor, which is great because now there's no sins of the father that you have to deal with. It's just the problem is that's the opposite of the world we live in, where there is a lineage. It does matter. It does determine your where you are in the hierarchy, by the way, too, right? And so getting rid of lineage is the same as getting rid of history at some level, and it's very important if you're lower in the hierarchy than you want to be. You have to get rid of things like lineage, otherwise you're screwed. But like, I wouldn't have had that insight in that way if I hadn't been watching Wheel of Time and Sally hadn't mentioned it, right? Like, those two things had to come together. I was like, oh, right. And there's a reason why I picked that one and not other, aside from the fact that it's actually well shot. Like, okay, I can deal with it. I got a 75-inch TV, thankfully now, which I didn't buy, which, good for me, to watch the show on. And I got to tell you, it looks pretty damn good, a 75-inch TV at 8 feet away. So
Nice.
right. And that's actually important to me personally. Like, yeah, it's got to look good. Otherwise I'm not that interested. But also, like, getting a pulse on this, on the, we'll say, pop culture arguments, that's how you do it. And unfortunately there isn't another way. And so, like, I can whine now about Lost, which I did like well before the last season. I was like, bullshit, because I put so much time into that show, not just watching it, but like I had to record it because, I was watching it with somebody. So I wouldn't watch it when it aired because he was working, and, we'd get together. A bunch of us would get together sometimes, not all the time, but like, we were watching it roughly on the same week and stuff for a reason. And then all the tech effort that went into making that happen before DVRs were a thing. That it was just a lot of work. And I look back and I go, yeah, but if I hadn't watched that, I really wouldn't have understood a bunch of stuff about why Hollywood collapsed. Because that was the signal that the no talent ass clowns had taken over. Right. Because it was the quote success of Lost, which is ironic, but it was a very successful show by the metrics.
Yeah.
Which is the reason why we get bad Star Wars. It's not the only reason, but actually, if I remember correctly, I might be misremembering this, but I don't think I am. Both Kathleen Kennedy and Jar Jar Abrams are Spielberg recommendations, or at least Spielberg adjacent. And a lot of people have noted this. Like, this happened too with, I think, Rachel Zegler. Like, Spielberg picked her up for a very specific thing, and then everybody else picked her up because Spielberg had picked her up. So they're just, there's the copying of the pattern, right, that they don't understand because they've observed Spielberg picks good people. Well, kind of, but he knows how to pick people and you don't. So maybe you don't just pick his people because maybe you don't know what he saw and why he picked them. Maybe he didn't pick them for their talent. Who knows? He might have picked them for other reasons that you don't understand because you're not him and you're not close enough to him. And then you elevate these people. Like, Rachel Zegler single-handedly wrecked the Snow White movie completely, utterly, in unbelievable ways from all accounts. Like, it's just, that story is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Right. But you won't see, unless you understand the rise of Jar Jar Abrams at the very least, you won't really see and understand that the incompetence rose up into the management of the companies, right, to the production level. And once that happens, all kinds of bad things manifest that look impossible and look deliberate, even though they're just actually the result of incompetence, right? Because people who don't know good from bad have to pick trends or fashions. Like, they have no choice. They can't discern.
Right.
They don't have another discernment mechanism. So if a trend comes along, like the Me Too movement, which is a load of garbage, by the way, or the gender movement, right? They're going to pick it up because they don't know what they're doing. And other people seem to be picking it up or whatever. I don't understand their decisions because I'm not there, right? But they're losing hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars. And they have been, as a collective, for like a decade, reliably. Like, there's no money in movies right now at all. Like, at all. In aggregate, they're losing money. Do not invest in a movie. You will almost certainly lose money, with the exception of some very small studios that are making some excellent films. But none of the blockbuster, quote, Hollywood guys, they're all bleeding cash like you wouldn't believe. The Disney company's already out of business for sure. I don't think there's anything you can do to fix them at this point. They have spent way too much money in the past 10 years on flops. Way too much. Far in excess of anything they can recoup. And it's been investment money. And the problem is they lost this park years ago. Years ago, that cash cow went away. That was long before the dust up with Florida. So I wouldn't have understood any of that if I hadn't seen Lost. Because once I saw Lost and I saw the disaster, I'm like, how did this happen? How did this person who cannot tell a story to save his ever-loving soul get a TV show on prime time that got hyped the way it got hyped? And what really happened there? Let's see what Brian has to say. Does prior proper framing prevent observations from being misinterpreted or altogether missed because of blind spots? Well, look, in theory, proper framing does that, but you're not really solving the problem. It's always like, you can't know if your framing is proper, right? I mean, you can kind of guess like, oh, my predictions are pretty good and therefore my framing is good enough. Yeah, okay, I'm with you. But like, you really need other people. Like, you're not going to understand if your frames are good unless you talk to other people about them and work them through with other people, right? Because the number of people that say things like, well, the Blue Church, and I come up with a dozen examples of how that doesn't work. And then they're like, oh my God. And I'm like, yeah. Like, and what, for example, let's just say you go, oh, well, Hollywood's just following the woke agenda. And I'm like, okay, but here are 5 movies that have no wokeness in them, and they all flopped. Like, how do you explain that? It's not the woke agenda that's doing the work there. It's the incompetence that's doing the work. Now, a lot of the incompetent people happen also to be woke because incompetent people are going to follow fashions and trends. But that's a side effect, not a cause. It's a symptom, right? And that's the problem.
Mm.
And Brian, how are they related, unrelated? Which is the they? Are you talking about the framing and the observations? Because you make observations through frames. Like, that's how you observe. Right? Like, you can't tell. Well, let me put it this way. So with your frame, you can't see that both my hands are up. You can't observe that until I do this, and then I put it in the frame, and then you can see it. But you didn't even see me put my hands up, and you don't know if they're up or down now because they're not in the frame. Right? And so the frame, and the thing is, reframing is powerful. If you listen to Peterson, he tells this story about this woman who, went to him and she was allegedly sexually abused, and he was like just listening to the story. Now, we could have rousing arguments about whether or not his style of doing this was correct, or he could have gotten the answers sooner using other therapeutic methods or whatever. I don't care to speculate, right? The point of the story is he finally figures out that when this incident happened, she and her brother were very young. And so the sexual abuse wasn't sexual abuse. It was an event that happened because kids are kids and they make mistakes and there's no meaning to it because they don't have the framing, right, to understand what they're doing.
Right.
And so her observation was this post hoc rationalization of what happened that was misframing the event. And all that had to happen for her to fix that whole traumatic experience and make it go away was a simple reframing.
Mhm.
And that wasn't done through force or propositional tyranny or whatever you want to call it. It was just a couple of questions, right? At least the way Peterson tells it, right? Do you think maybe that you were too young and he was too young to actually know that this was a significant event, or that this shouldn't have been done, or whatever? And then once that got considered, the reframing happened, and then the trauma went away and it was gone because it got integrated differently. And it was just incorrectly integrated into her life, or it couldn't be properly integrated, causing whatever it was causing. I don't think he went into details, right? But then the minute that was gone, it was gone, and that's it, right? But again, that comfort of understanding and properly integrating can also blind you to observation. So life sucks and it's hard, and I cannot recommend, Castle. Cannot recommend.
No. But yeah, and it requires, it requires a bit of kind of going back between the two. I mean, you can't let yourself become stagnant in either one. And a lot of times, like, you do need to reorient. Like, that requires stopping to observe for a moment,
Right.
And I experienced this recently. I mean, we talked a bit about, like, managers get into the cashier thing and everything. And, like, I'm in a management position, but I have been doing a lot of lower level responsibilities because we're waiting to get new people to answer the phones, do some of the stuff and everything like that. And even though I've spent a lot of time in my work history answering phones, I still absolutely can't stand it. Like, it is really just the worst. And as soon as the phone call is answered, like, people and I do great. Like, the conversations go very well and everything. Like, that's all perfectly fine. But the reality of having to answer a phone call that I wasn't anticipating that's coming up there is just like one of the worst mortifications that I experience. And to the point where, like, I will experience actual injuries and health issues that will, that can last for a certain amount of time, like throughout my life. And I'll look at those and actually say to myself, seriously, like, those were easier than just sitting here for a few hours answering phone calls. And even if they lasted for weeks or months, or, I broke my ankle one time and everything, like, right on the growth plate when I was, like 11 years old or something like that. It was a nasty sort of thing. Did my own rehab and we were fine in, 2 months or something like that. But even still, like, it was an uncomfortable situation. And, like, that was still, in a certain way, because, you can just kind of, like, stoic your way through the pain and everything like that. But there's something about having to, like, no, I'm giving the things that are more valuable to me than my physical comfort, which is my time, energy, and attention. I have other stuff I want to be doing, even in terms of work. Like, there's stuff I could be getting done, but just that sort of thing. But then reframing it, like, that was something that I've kind of experienced a lot today. And today for Friday was just ridiculously high call volume by comparison to previous Fridays for the last 3 years. And I was, I just kind of realized, I was like, oh, you know what? And Sally had made a comment about this a little bit before, about kind of like allowing yourself to experience some sort of pain, and that if you don't, that there's a lot of really negative consequences to that. And I realized, no, like, that's the thing, is that this is the one that's not easy for me, right? Like, this is the area that I'm actually weak in. that I
Right.
would rather have. Oh, give me the tougher one, but it's the incessant itch, right? That is so much worse than like slamming your hand in a car door by accident or something. Like just being itchy is actually a lot worse in some ways. And so it's
Right.
like, no, I
Right.
have to become more disciplined in this area, and this is good for me. And like changing that mindset actually completely. There was still the initial, knee-jerk reaction, every
Right.
time because the habit isn't built yet. I haven't integrated that yet. But
Right.
reminding myself of that frame that I've accepted within a second or two of hearing the phone ring completely changed my perspective and going into the calls. So
No, that's good. That's good. I like what Ixnat said here. I suspect trauma is an event you don't know how to integrate. So yeah, Ixnat, if you listen to because people are just using the way they describe trauma, it's everywhere. Like it's everything and everybody has it all the time. But if you listen to what they're actually complaining about, we'll say, or actually sort of trying to work through conceptually, it's events that either you don't know how to integrate, or you fail to just accept. Because some things you just can't integrate. Like but what that means is that you're trying to give your identity primacy over reality. And the bottom line is, reality has primacy over you. Reality, to some extent, is incomplete short form definition, that which objects to your subjective experience. So there's that, and that's the problem, is that some things just have to be accepted, and you have to work around them. That's why Stoicism is so useful nowadays. Right? Everyone's like, why is Stoicism? It's because it teaches you to accept a bunch of things that you can't change. And in the age of hubris here, through the age of gnosis, a lot of people, that's what they need. Like they just need to start accepting things that they have no control over. Like I have no control over the war in Ukraine. None. Zero.
right.
Zip. None. Nothing. I don't have any influence over it at all. And maybe as a collective we could, but that's not the same thing. And it's super different. And also I don't want to have to deal with it. Like honestly, I just don't. This is why we have leaders. That I don't have to think about the war in Ukraine. Right? I don't want to listen to the Ukrainians who deceived me and said they were Russian, because none of the Ukrainians I ever met said they were from Ukraine. None. They all said they were Russian, very mysteriously. And then the war comes out, and they're like, I'm Ukrainian. And I'm like, I'm not impressed anymore. Like, I have my questions about your motivations and how you think about the world, because you didn't tell me you were Ukrainian. You weren't a proud Ukrainian before the war. Real suspicious. Real suspicious. Sorry.
It was funny one time. So I started learning Russian a while back, and I've kind of suspended my studies for a little bit, but I've still memorized like several thousand words, and I just can't string them together as well as I should by spending more time integrating them. But we'll work on that when I actually have any time to do anything. But there was one time where I was like, oh, I'd like to order food in Russian, poorly, right? But I was like, I want to go and do that. So I went looking for a Russian restaurant, found one online and everything. I show up and they spoke Ukrainian, and it's like, it's like Kentucky Russian. Like it's completely, if you're not used to the dialect, like it's so different.
Really?
And yeah. And so it's like, it really is. It's like going like deep south, or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh my goodness, if you're not used to this, that it's just not going to happen. And super nice people, tasty food and everything like that, but they had to do it in English, so which was fine. But then I realized like, oh yeah, and then they were from Ukraine. Like it was all before all this stuff, this was several years ago, maybe, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, something like that. But yeah, that was an interesting one for me, where I was just like, they weren't what they said that they were, but also they were like, Ukraine literally means like out on the border, like it's like
right. They just don't want to acquiesce to being on the border of Russia for some reason, all of a sudden, right? Which they don't want to understand Donetsk and Luhansk they're Russians, guys. They're not. They don't talk your crazy dialect. It's the same way that the French absolutely, utterly refuse to understand French Canadian, and the French Canadians understand the French just fine.
Yeah.
Just fine, like no problem at all, right? And yeah, you're right. It's the same with Northerners and Southerners. Like you go down to Alabama, and them people, the way the way them talking down there, I don't like it. But I'm just not snobby enough to care. I'm like, whatever, I can understand you well enough, and they're better people because they're not snobby. So that's already one leg up. But it's the same with Russia, right? Like the Russians, Ukrainian, right? The Ukrainians speak both just fine.
Yeah.
Right? They're okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's one of those things too, is that it requires more energy and attention to actually, absorb what they're saying. Like, you have to, in a certain sense, you have to give up a part of yourself in order to do that. Like you have to not necessarily even in that case condescend, but like there's a certain conformity that's required of you. And like accepting that, okay, I'm going to be participating within your frame. That we're doing this. Like back when I would do whale watching tours and stuff, I just talked to people about whales. There was a guy that was on the boat sometimes, and he was just like, he must have been bored on the water and never set foot on land or something, because he had like, he was one of those guys that just, it sounds like they're just talking gibberish, and like you could no one understood him. And I spent a long time just listening to the guy, and I actually did wind up understanding him. Either that, or I got like the pseudo schizophrenia thing that people get when they spend too much time, and I'm just like making things up, and it's just like, wow, like this guy's got some great insights, and meanwhile he's not saying anything. But great guy. I don't remember his name. I probably couldn't repeat it to you if I did, but. Yeah, but there is something about that you can actually glean a whole lot of really interesting information by doing that. But it does require, like, it's high cost, So, I mean, I can understand, like, having to, like, it's necessary to discriminate against certain things. People use that term a lot of times to say, like, oh, a type of oppression or something like that. But then you praise someone who has discriminating tastes or something. It's like, well, you have to cut something out. You only have so much time for something.
Right.
So, you just have to kind of discern the trade-off, I guess.
Yeah. People don't see the world clearly when they don't understand. People following patterns, just mimicking them. They're really not understanding what they're doing at all. And then they're trying to copy what they think Peterson's doing, right? Or Elon's doing, or whatever. And, and the worst part is, for some people it will work out because they do see it clearly. It's just that you might not be that person. Right. And B, some people will work out because they'll get lucky. This is one of the things that Taleb talks about that I really like. It's like a lot of people just got lucky. And that's how they made their millions. And it has nothing to do with their skills whatsoever. They just right place, right time. Right. And some people were just shepherded along by people who, liked them for whatever reason. And they rode a wave and they didn't know that. And they thought it was them. And, and some people, like, man, I know a lot of people who they're just part of the right. They're just in the hierarchy pretty far up. And so they get opportunities that, like, whatever, like they're not good at their jobs at all. But because of who they know, they got the job. And it's not even that they're necessarily bad at their jobs. They're just not good at their jobs. And a lot of people don't, they don't understand that difference. I'm like, some people are not bad at their jobs, but they also don't do their jobs well enough. Because that's a thing. It doesn't mean you're bad at your job. It just means that you get a lot of support, and like, money is momentum. And if you have enough money, well, that momentum can carry you through a lot of bad employees. Like, seriously. Right. And and people don't realize that. And especially people that work for like nonprofits and stuff. It's like, no, you really don't understand. Like, you're not under pressure to perform. The odds that there's a good performer and a nonprofit are actually quite low because they're not under pressure to perform. And so they don't get the best and the brightest. They might get someone competent enough to run the thing. That's fine. That's great. Like, the good.
Mhm.
Please be busy. But they wouldn't excel if in a for-profit company at all. I know people like that, and it's scary. It's scary. Like, if their salary was on the line, they wouldn't make it.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of that recently as well. I mean, it's another one of those things, like, managing at an IT company, like, we'll see this over the years, with that you get people that they sell themselves as, a certain level of technician, and it's on their resume, and like they have the work history for the stuff, but then you start to see their performance and you realize, like, there's a certain amount of money that we're paying for the services that this person said that they could do, and then in practice it's just not happening. And you do the thing where you say, oh well, maybe we could have them try this type of thing, or we'll move them over to this side or do some sort of thing. And that a lot of times it's just the fact that they could do that type of thing with a long enough time constraint. They
Right.
probably could do it, and it's like, that's fine. But when it comes down to, oh, there's a lot of things breaking right now and we only have so many people, and then there are
Mhm.
multiple people who are all on the same tier, and
Right.
there's a clear disparity between
Mhm.
their level of competence, and then even to the point where there are people who are below in the hierarchy that are actually
Right.
even they are actually sort of almost meriting that person's place. Like, you could probably swap them and still be running a little bit better.
Yeah.
And sometimes that does happen, but
Oh yeah.
I've seen that
I've seen
multiple
that
times.
happen. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's too bad, and like, I see that happen, and you give people like a lot of chance. I have seen some people who were outright bad at a lot of
Mm.
stuff, but really you try to give them as many chances as humanly possible, and then eventually they wind up just kind of tying themselves up if they're. And I think that's where the problem is as well, is that it really is like the age of hubris thing, is that they think of themselves that they can go and do the thing extremely well. They sell themselves extremely competent,
Yep.
in the interviews and on the resume and all this stuff. But then you get the guys, like, I've seen this recently, where you get guys that they start off as like extremely low level,
Mhm.
and like just almost like handyman level, just like not actually very, very IT savvy. And then they actually put in the hours, like researching stuff. They are actually trainable. They just never had the information or the opportunity before. They stick around for a while, and you start seeing, like, oh wow, he solved that. Like, sometimes you just toss something because, like, I'll do this when we have low resources. Not to reduce the human beings to just the word resources, but that sometimes we'll have very few people and we'll have a bunch of major things breaking. And it's like, well, we've got, the level 3s are all sick, and then all the level 2 guys are all, taken up. So I'm going to send some tough stuff over to a level 1 guy, and then he fixes it. And like, it's like, wow, like, maybe we should reconsider just a little bit of what this guy's
Right.
doing in the future. I learned this recently.
Mm.
There's a guy, he's working as a level 1, doing, just setting people up with credentials and stuff like that and everything. And then I actually did a little one-on-one meeting with him, and I realized this guy is extremely good at admin, like, and documentation, like, to the point where
Mm.
he is very low on the totem pole compared to everyone else. He's a humble guy, family man, and everything like that, very friendly, and really puts in the work. And you look at his notes and they're like just immaculate and everything compared to a lot of other guys. And I was like, when we actually don't need him to be dealing with just like crowd control stuff, we should really put him to work on some admin stuff, because he'd be way more useful there. But I didn't know that. I even told him, I was like, I should have had this meeting with you like a year ago so that we probably couldn't have done anything anyway because we got slammed. But, just to realize, like, oh, I wasn't observing this person down here well
Right.
enough to
Right.
realize like, oh, he's he's not a foot, he's a hand.
Yeah, but you had an understanding of the hierarchy and where he was in it,
Right.
but you weren't observing the hierarchy to figure
Mhm.
out, oh, wait a minute, this
Right.
could be improved.
Yeah.
Right, because it goes both ways. Like,
Yeah.
understanding is not some magical thing. It's not some magical upgrade to the way you interact with the world. That's not what it is. It's just a state, and you can't stay there, and you shouldn't. You shouldn't just live in your understanding because the world changes and you change too, right? Like, you can understand, how much you could bench 10 years ago. That doesn't mean you can still do it.
No.
Right. And people make that mistake all the time. Right. And it's actually a huge problem that I don't think people pay anywhere near enough attention to.
Mm. But it's a little bit like, I mean, especially with the understanding or standing under thing, it's a lot like trying to find shade on like a hot day or something like that. Like the angle of the sun is going to change. So if you want to
Yeah.
remain in the shade, like you actually need to pivot a little bit. And it's not
Yeah.
that like that's a nice little simple embodied thing that a kid can do that you're not gonna actually like pay attention to that or anything. But it's a nice little way of kind of seeing like, well, you can still stay if it's like a gazebo or something like that. You can stay within the bounds of the structure, but still realize like, oh, if I don't want the sun shining in my eyeball, like I'm gonna have to move over here if I want to stay here.
Right.
At least for right now. Like, maybe I'll be back there in a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think with the linear progression thinking that we have from the video game reality, which is going to be a different video, I'm going to do video game realities because you see that everywhere. when you have that linear progression thinking, it's like, oh, I made it to stage 1 and now I'm at stage 2. But in real life, you have to go back and visit stage 1 all the time.
Right.
To your earlier point with your story, but also, yeah, you can't just stay in understanding mode forever. You've got to go back and observe and adjust your your orientation in the world. You just have to do that. And that places serious limits on how many things you can quote know. Right. But also that's because there are serious limits how many things you can know.
Yeah.
It's not a magic trick. It's just you're trying to do too much in many cases.
Yeah. And you make the point in the video that, it's like there's only so much that you can actually learn and understand if you're spending 10 hours a day on entertainment. And, or oftentimes more. But there's also this, to your point now, that there are certain things that you need to attend to that if you're doing them properly, that 10 hours is getting taken up anyway,
Right.
So I find this now, like as part of my sort of seasonal observation, I've been waking up at 5:20 in the morning. I might pull that back to 5. But I've been doing that. And like, I start work at 8 and I have 0 commute. So I have 3 hours almost before work, and consistently with the amount of things that I intend to do, I just barely get them done by the time it's time to start work. So it's a slow ramp up though. It's not immediately, oh, time to run and do all these things or any of these, but it is a slow ramp up that is well planned out. And there's different stages that kind of everything goes through to kind of, it's a slow wake up process as well, but I'm being productive the whole time. And then by the end of it, like a lot of times I finish cooking breakfast, 20 minutes before it's time to work. And half the time I eat half of it and then I take the rest of it with me to the desk. And that's why I'm considering pulling back to 5 rather than 5:20. But I'm realizing like if I had that extra 20 minutes, I could actually nail it, I think. But I'm realizing like, man, I used to wake up 5 minutes before work, don't tell anybody.
Right.
But I used to do that. And now I'm waking up 3 hours before work and I'm still just making it in, just on time. But I'm nice and prepared. All my tabs are up an hour before I start and everything like that. That way the computer's nice and woken up and everything too. And, and I can keep an eye on all the stuff just in case anything urgent does happen and I have to show up early. But just all of those things are necessary. And that's an everyday thing. and it's actually not monotonous for me because there's enough variety in there that I'm actually properly ramped up for everything. But then the amount of time that I have to actually focus on other things is drastically reduced. Like
Right.
I have 3 hours before work, and that is pretty much never allowing any time for entertainment.
Right.
And like I just simply don't have time for that. I might listen to something in the last hour or something like that while I'm finishing cooking. But and then I've got 3 hours on a normal weekday from when I finish work to when it's time to go to bed. And so
Right.
it's like, and a lot of that time is actually even maybe an hour of that might actually be meal and dish prep for the following morning. So that can actually be only 3 hours,
Right. Right.
So, yeah. So it's like, but at the same time, like that is, I don't know if you would say, like, I was using the word moderation. I don't know if like rarefy or like just setting in its place, I guess. Like it sets those other things, it sets a container for the frivolous things.
That's right.
And it's conveniently kind of a reverse of my morning thing where I start out very, very slow and then it gets into chores and cooking and eating and then time to work. And then going from working down to prep for the next day and then winding down potentially relaxation and entertainment and then slowing down into time to go to bed, and I've got a nice little crescendo going,
Yeah, it's a good cycle.
Yeah.
And it's amazing, like how many things you can sort of survive better because you have a structure like that. Once that structure's in place and intact, it really, the momentum of the structure helps you to have a better life. It doesn't, it constrains you in the day,
right,
but it frees you up in the week. And people don't understand that it just works differently at different scales.
Yeah. And I will say my overall, like, it's an interesting thing, and I think I made a comment on this before when I was first kind of setting up this set of, it's not only processes, but I'll just call it that for now, that because I mean it's like it's across time and all these things. I don't know how I would define that, but when I was first kind of starting out on this particular setup, which is working really well, I started noticing like a massive decrease in my energy, which I'm still kind of tired a lot of the time, but my agency, like the actual effects of the actions that I'm taking and the amount of actions that I can take, which have real effects that are observably verifiable by other human beings, has increased dramatically in the last few weeks. Like, I don't always get the stuff done that I wanted to that day, but I'm getting like a lot of things done. And so that's been very encouraging. So something is going right, but it is sort of, I mean, in the term I would use, which maybe there's a better one for this framing, but like by mortifying the individualism, submitting my time, energy, and attention, and my wish to do the things that I want, which is often, I mean, especially like on the natural level, it's always, I want to eat, I want entertainment, like I want to stop, being uncomfortable with these phone calls or these people I don't like talking to or whatever. But by just kind of saying, okay, yeah, like that's coming up later. Like we're just, like this is the time to do this thing and it's good for you and you're not going to suffer as much if you just kind of, just bear with it right now and everything. All of that is like, it just really focuses you so well. And to your point of like being able to survive things by having that structure,
right?
Like I really do see that the amount of chaos has been dramatically increasing, and I'm just not getting wiped out. Like I have a baseline tired, and a lot of times that just kind of goes away. Like I'm not feeling it right now.
Oh, good.
But in the morning, like you definitely feel it. Like when I was spending more time, entertaining myself or whatever, I actually did get slightly better sleep. I maybe, but it's tough to say because I want to say that, but the quality now, I have fewer interruptions now as well. So like I tire myself out well enough to do it. But just seeing that, the quality of my experience in doing all this stuff and my overall attitude when things do go wrong, or at least not according to plan, wrong as in like crooked.
Right.
When that happens, like my ability to respond to that is just so much improved just within like the last 2 or 3 weeks. And
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Excellent. Castle here reminds me of what I've been pondering, the connection between ritual and meaning. Yeah, I mean, meaning is that's a tough thing to talk about because, meaning is something you co-manifest with the creation that you're kind of stuck in, right? Thrown into, if you want to use really stupid terms for obvious things, because you're wicked smart or whatever Heidegger pretends to be. I think that ritual in particular allows you the contrast to both participate in meaning and observe meaning outside of that participation. Right. And so it's not so much that enacting rituals is always meaningful. That's not true. But it affords the ability for meaning to just kind of manifest.
Yeah.
Right. And it allows you to see it when it happens because you have contrast. Because you do some ritual and some weird miracle happens, right? So, you can look at the prep for Friday as a ritual because it is. Most Fridays I'm on the Discord server talking about the notes. And, Sally Joe was reminding me like, oh, you were working because my distraction level today was as high as it gets. Like I just kept sit there. I open the notes window. I'm sitting in the notes window and shiny thing. And I was just completely off it today for whatever reason. And Sally's like, you're working on the notes. It's like, oh yeah, I was. Let me do that. Let me finish that. Right. And then Brian comes in. Right. And he's just like, what's going on? Because, no, you come into the Discord server, you never know what's going on. Sometimes everyone's just completely quiet. And you're like, why is no one talking? And sometimes people are just yapping about some weird history thing or making completely puerile jokes or whatever, stuck in some absurdist fantasy of mine. And everyone just plays along because what else are you gonna do? Right. And so you don't know. And then ends up contributing heavily to the live stream. Right. And so it's like, oh, right. But that miracle was only afforded and it was only meaningful that we do that because something weird happened that, broke the ritual, not at all, right? But like, this isn't how it usually happens. But because that ritual was in place, it afforded the participation. And then we get all this great material that, I hadn't thought of basically, right? But was super important to making the live stream better effectively. So that's really like it does both, right? It gives you an affordance for meaning, which may or may not manifest, but it also allows you to see it when it happens, right? Because you're like, wait a minute, this ritual. It doesn't happen this way very often. I mean, the whole like this week, like I don't even know what happened this week, other than I know I've got this massive fungal infection somewhere in my body. So, but like this week was a disaster. 2 recordings, almost all. Well, one of them I just throw away. It's gone. Right? It was a reaction. The Eric Weinstein thing was supposed to be a reaction video, and now it's not. It's commentary. It's supposed to be a reaction video, and there was one piece that I left out of the commentary that I was like, I just forgot to put that back in. But what I think it was better anyway. Fingers crossed. Is something to tell myself. The other one that I still have yet to re-record, like I don't know what happened. It was like a technical problem, and in the midst of this, like technical problems all over the place, the computer like suddenly my email's ability to send email is like random, and rebooting the entire machine doesn't necessarily fix the problem. Although I know it's a problem with the client software. I've already figured that out. Now I'm like, I've been running this client software for a long time. Do I have to get rid of it now? And what am I going to replace it with? And man, remember back, Mark, when you were writing an email client from scratch in C because you knew this was going to happen someday, many decades ago? Yes. Maybe you should just fix that problem. And, but I'm nowhere. I'm not half the coder I was when I was 19 or whatever. 20, whatever. Whenever I started that, I was probably 18 when I did that project. I still have the code somewhere, I'm sure, but also it wasn't ready then. Me trying to restart it now is ridiculous. But also I'm like, I knew this was going to happen. I knew it was going to happen. I knew I needed to write all my own code, all my own tools. I have to write them all from scratch. I knew the world was going to fail me there. But yeah, I don't think anyone else is going to jump in.
Maybe not.
You want to wrap things up, Castle? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. I was just going to add one little thing, I guess, kind of tie in Ixnat's comment with.
That's good. It'll give people time to jump in case anybody actually has any more. But
that's
go
fine.
ahead.
I'll stall. But I was thinking about this thing of the ritual and meaning. So one of the things too, it also assumes that you're participating in a ritual that's actually like bearing some sort of good produce, like the thing with the ritual that you do of prepping the notes before the live stream and everything like that, like that's something you've been doing consistently. Right. And so like you get those black swan moments and everything like today. But there are also it's possible to poorly aim the existing ritual as well. Like you could just aim it wrong. And there are rituals that are kind of pre-framed, you could say. Like the image that I'm getting is and those frames are not necessarily, they may be good or not, and you don't have to participate in it. You can observe other people participating in them and then see how's that working out for them. But I just kind of think of these things like, those MMO type games like Destiny 2, where you get, it's like, okay, there's a ritual involved in, first you boot up the machine and then you boot up the game and then you go in there and you check the daily contracts and the weekly contracts and the monthly contracts, and you check all these things. And then it's just like, okay, like, you're checking all these different things and then looking at what the current available missions are and all this stuff. And it's just like, that was where I saw like, oh, shiny colors and space knights and stuff like that. And it was like, that's cool when I first played it like years back. And then I looked at it, I was just like, this is predatory. Like that's just like this. Actually, what's interesting is that it's almost a 1-to-1 counterfeit of a healthy prayer life. Like in terms of like the different layers of participation and how frequently and the amount of time. And it's just like, no, it's actually 1-to-1, just like a complete replacement actually. And that kind of terrified me. And I look back in horror. Of just some of those things, because I realize like there's a lot of really good assets there that are just, pleasing to the eye and good to eat, and it is some rough stuff, man. Like it really is like the sirens calling to you from the rocks. And but that's also where the observation, like if you're observing the sirens and you see people just crashing into that, then like, okay, maybe I don't actually have to get close enough to understand why that's happening. I don't need to study this. I'll just stay way out of earshot. And it's just, maybe I'm just, even if I'm good enough, why put myself through the trouble? Like it's just not, it's just not worth it. And, and you make this point in the video that you put out as well, is that there are often like just better alternatives, and that comes back
Mhm.
down to the malice definition. Like, and I have to be very technical here because again, like my preferred form of entertainment is games, but versus movies or TV shows or whatever. But it is a matter of, has everything that needs attending to been already attended to? And then
Right.
also, are you actually discriminating well enough to see, is the thing that you're choosing something that is going to be filled with, like a nihilistic narrative? Is it something that is
Right.
going to actually is designed to steal your time and money and everything? Is it
Right.
something that you can participate with friends, or if it's something that's just for yourself, like is it something that you can pause at a moment's notice? Like that's something that's really important for me, is that I'm like,
Mm.
if this is something that I can't pause, then I probably shouldn't have it, because I notice with myself, like if something comes up and I'm listening to music, that it's frustrating for me to have to pause that and reorient and do
Right.
whatever sort of thing. And sometimes
Right.
it's better for me to just knowingly, like intentionally avoid music during a time
Mhm.
when I know
Mhm.
I'm going to be cognitively overloaded if something breaks my concentration and I'm
Right.
I'm working on something. And like today I was doing a few hundred contact updates in our system for this one company, and that was something that I could pop in an earbud and listen to some classical music, or some sort of something jazzy or something like that, and I knew that's not going to mess me up. But if I'm observing people asking questions in chats, thankfully I didn't have to do any of that at that time. If I'm doing all that stuff and I have to think about what this person is asking me, and it's not just a spreadsheet and then another data entry system that I'm working with,
Right.
and I'm listening to music and then calls come in or something
Yep.
important happens,
Yep.
that's just going to completely blow me out. And
Right.
then I'm just going to be mad. And that's going to be, bad for all of the future participations I'm going to have. And I would see that with myself. Like I would observe in myself, and I was observable by others, that there was an increased amount of irritability when I was engaging with things that were
Mm.
stealing excessive amounts of my time or were demanding so much attention of me. Because that's the thing, I could get really good at competitive shooter games and stuff, but
Right.
it's like, at what cost? It
Right.
just actually puts you so much in a competitive framework that it's impossible to actually, like to even say like good game, to the other people. It's like,
Right.
I don't,
Right.
I don't
Right.
want them to have a good game. And it's like, yeah,
Exactly.
being in that oppositional mindset, or not being aware of the types of signals that are coming at you and are being filtered in a specific way
Mhm.
that you actually can't get around. Like maybe not supposed to be feeling a certain way by design, but like, side effects are really just effects that
Mhm.
weren't the
Mhm.
the primary intention. Like you get those
Exactly.
medications
Yep.
and it's like, oh, also we've got all these side effects. It's like, no, those are direct consequences. It's just not the thing that you wanted to happen, you know.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's good. I mean, when you have an understanding of yourself and you can do some observation, or better yet, get people to help you observe, you can really adjust your participation so that you're not overloaded, because cognitive overload is a thing and it affects people. And of course, I have a video on that. So
Yeah,
the live stream.
yeah.
Um, yeah, it's super important. So yeah, what do you got for a wrap up? Because no one else wants to jump in, which is fine. Uh,
Oh, that's all right.
I,
I
I'm
mean,
tired
even
anyway.
still, yeah, it was like
What do
what,
you get?
2 hours
What
and
do you get
50
for a wrap
minutes.
up for this observation versus understanding?
Yeah, I mean, just I don't take time to reorient. I mean, maybe like I want to just kind of say early and often, but just semi frequently. Just take the time. It is a pain to have to stop and switch from one sort of task to another. Like you mentioned, the good and bad types of multitasking. And a lot of times reorienting can feel like the bad type of multitasking that you actually do have to completely stop.
Right.
Like those people that are not me, who I should probably be more like, who schedule specific times to check their email, as opposed to having automatic notifications on their phone and then checking it instantly. That is something that I do and need to work on. But being able to also recognize things in yourself, like it's pretty easy to see where you're going wrong. Like I just immediately identified just by taking time to observe a phenomena and then insert myself into it. Like I just recognized something I could work on. So taking that extra little bit of time, lessen the amount of attention that you're giving to certain things so that you're not occupying all of it. And then that way you can reorient and make another move if you have to. And then just do that often enough that you don't get completely wiped out, honestly. And if something works across time, then integrate that and you'll get a better understanding of maybe not even necessarily why it works, but just how it works and that it works and, what the consequences are of engaging with it or not.
Right.
And then by doing that, you can get proper integration and hopefully do that with other people and set a good example.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, it's important to understand the difference between observation and understanding and not treat them as though they are part of a hierarchy or some sort of level system in a video game, to sort of the video game video that I did, right? Because it's not how it works. And this idea of progress is nonsense. And it's destroying us as a culture, which, it's a good hint for don't do that. And, we need to be more careful about these differences, because when we don't have an appreciation for the difference between observation and understanding, we don't see when other people are trapped with a lack of understanding. We don't see the limits of their observation. We just think they're fine and maybe we should follow them because maybe they have more money or they sound better than we do, or they just have a plan for something or seem to have a plan for something that we don't have a plan for. And that may seem important, even when it's not. So that's why you need to cultivate your appreciation for the difference between these various different concepts, and not take them for granted and not just throw these words around like it's fine. Like it's not fine. There's a difference between information and knowledge. There's a difference between observation and understanding. That you can't just rely on one over the other. You need to go back and forth. Like it's just required. And the amount changes, right? I mean, early on when you're learning something, you observe more than you understand by definition. And then when you understand something, you can observe it less, but never zero. You always have to refresh your observation to keep calibrating. And unless logic, reason, and rationality, have to start from observation and be grounded there to some extent, even if that is unstable and has to change. It's really important because otherwise you'll just get fooled by people all the time. And yeah, and look, no live stream next week. I will be looking at petroglyphs in Arizona after having enjoyed Vegas. But hopefully I'll get at least 2 videos out. I probably won't be doing the book club, unfortunately. I'll do it tomorrow because we're leaving on Sunday, but I won't be able to do it the following week. Most likely, maybe I can. I don't have much hope on that. We'll see. I don't even know what time it'll be when I'm out in Arizona because I can't do math. So, or where I'll be because we don't have specific plans for getting back home yet. We know where we have to be to get planes, but I don't know where I have to be before that we have to get planes. So we'll find out though. We'll figure it all out. So thanks everybody. Have a great next 2 weeks. I'll see you in 2 weeks, most likely. I don't think there's anything blocking me 2 weeks from now from doing a live stream. I don't know what the topic will be. Again, we have a bunch of backup topics. That's what happened today was I just forgot about the live stream, or at least didn't prep for the live stream, whether I remembered or not before. So I had to pull pull a topic out of my hat, but fortunately, we have a hat full of topics. So have a great time, everybody. See you in a couple weeks. Take care, behave, and just remember the most important thing, which is that the world needs you to be better, and that's all the world needs from you. It doesn't actually require much more. Have a good